Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 231. My name is NBZ, and I'm an idiot. I'm very stupid, and, you know, I've done something that I should be very ashamed of, but I kept doing it for a while, and now it has bit me in the arse. Okay, so Bally, here's the thing. So,
this is going to be a long list of things.
My Xbox Series X controller, right? Okay, it's a red one with a white bottom, right? And here's the thing: when you have a white bottom of a controller, it gets dirty very easily. Okay, lots of dirt on it, and you look at the back, and you're like, oh, that's icky. I want to get rid of that, right? So, as a smart person, what they would do, they'd probably get like a cloth or something, and like put some wetness on it.
You should buy a pack of wet wipes. We have plenty for Bally Jr.
Well, of course, yes. Unfortunately, not having a child, I don't have many wet wipes around, but maybe I should.
They're available to non-children people.
That's true. Non-children owners.
Non-children.
I don't, but maybe I should go buy some. So anyway, this is what I've been doing over the past year, Bally, is I'm like, okay, that's a bit dirty. Let's go to the sink. So I go to the sink, and I just put it on like very lightly, and then I just like put the angle, the kind of like corner of the controller under the sink, and I just like lightly dab it and just like scrub it a bit and that sort of stuff. And it's been fine. I've had no issue. I'm like, this is a great solution. I don't need to go get papers or nothing. So I just do that. And so, like, over this weekend, or, like, just before, like, on, actually, last week, I was like, okay, I was playing Tinykin, which we're going to talk about on the show, and I was like, oh, it's a bit dirty, let's go clean it, and I did. I was like, fine, great, and I started playing Tinykin again, and my character just starts like moving in a direction without the analog stick moving. I'm like, what's going on? It must be a bug or something. So I'm like, oh, let's restart the game, it's fine. And then it kind of stopped for a while, and then like every now and again, and I was be in the menus and be like, oh, why is it going like weirdly up and down? I was like, all right, whatever, I'll forget about that. And I kind of forgot about it. I was like, oh, it must be some weird bug in Tinykin, I don't know what's going on. And then the next day I was playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, and I was like, all right, let's jump into this. And, you know, it'd been fine, I came back to it, and I started running in a direction, and I was like, why is Ichiban not running at his full speed? And I was holding the analog stick all the way forward, and he was doing a light jog, and I was like, I'm pressing A, and then I like started trying to do it towards the camera, and when I did it towards the camera, he would start running towards the camera, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Have I got some weird bug in this game where like Ichiban only jogs when he's going forward and runs when he's towards the camera? I was like, what the fuck is happening? And then it occurred to me, Bally, it came back into my brain that I had washed my controller lightly, of course, but it had seemingly got a bit of water into where the analog stick is, so it had water damage, and I was like, well, okay, I don't know if I can fix this. I looked up online, how do you fix water damage? And people were like taking apart their controller. I was like, well, I can't fucking do that.
I know. Loads of solutions are always just like, take your controller apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I was like,
I would try the toothbrush around the analog stick.
Well, so I did. I got my I've got compressed air that I use to clean my PC. So I just started like spraying that inside it. I basically left it in the cupboard near the boiler, like wrapped up in my trousers for a night to see if that would like help. I don't think anything's helped.
Wrapped up in your trousers. You stick it in a bag of rice.
Yeah, I know, but the rice, what if the rice gets inside the controller? You know, it's just a bit of a pain. So, I basically decided that I'm unusable. It might come back to life, who knows? But I then ordered a new controller. So I ordered a Shock Blue controller, Bally, okay? And this controller came in the post, unboxed it, started playing Tinykin with it, and what the fuck is wrong with this controller? The right button, the RB button, has like, and this is a very me thing, because it's like, I think regular people would notice this, but it's just like, if you hold it down and then slightly unhold it, it basically, like the stickiness, it feels like there's a bit of stickiness to it, basically. And same with like the right shoulder button as well.
Is it the RB or the RT?
So the front one is the one where you like, you should have a nice snappy click to it, but this one had like a bit of a softer click to it, so that if I held it down and then like slightly removed pressure.
I've got a slightly sticky right trigger, so it's fine for the first, 20 minutes, but then for a driving game, for example, after a little while it can get a tiny bit sticky, and
okay. Is that something you've had since the beginning, or is it like something that's happened over time?
It happened very quickly. I don't think it was right at the beginning.
All right.
I think it might have been exacerbated by like Forza and stuff.
Yeah.
But
well, anyway, Tinykin was a great game to be playing for it because you have the soap that you slide on, and so you're having to hold that, and so like I find myself I'm holding it, and then suddenly he will just stop. He will just like get off of it and then get back on again. I'm like, this is a brand new controller. What the fuck, dude? So I have now boxed that back up, sent it back to Shop 2, and I'm awaiting a third controller. So this is my controller situation for the past week or so, and it has meant that I've basically been forced to use my DualSense on my PC.
Did you try the toothbrush trick on the right bumper though?
No, I didn't.
Honestly, like I've had real success with my wearing old analog stick on my Pro controller, and also I had a sticky button on my old new 3DS. Thanks Nintendo. And it really fixed the trigger. Like it really made it unsticky. So
yeah. Well, the thing is, this was a brand new out-the-box controller, so I was like, this is bullshit. I should just get a new one, basically. And it's not gonna cost me anything, so I might as well just do it and get an actual good controller. So, yeah, I've had a bit of a controller situation the last week, and it's not fun, but what are you going to do? Sometimes the bad luck strikes, and you're like, well, you know, I broke one, and then the other one came, and it already was kind of broken, so let's get a third one and see if third time's a charm. So hopefully that comes through. But yeah, as I was saying, I've now been using my DualSense on my PC instead, and let me tell you, it's reminded me how much I fucking hate the DualSense. It's the most uncomfortable controller of all time. Oh my god. The features on that thing, top tier. Probably the best features in a controller. The comfortability of that controller, for my small ass hands, fucking sucks. I know, Bally, you have bigger hands than me, so it's like a perfect controller for you. But
I do. I'm okay with it, but I am shocked that they went like up in size from the not DualSense, DualShock.
DualShock 4, yeah.
PS4.
It's so wide. Why is it so wide?
It's really big.
Yeah.
I've got God of War to come out to enjoy that. So.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to get used to it for another 30-40 hours when that comes out. But anyway. Hello, welcome to this Nintendo show, where we'll talk about Nintendo controllers and how they're always perfect and they never die, right? Joy-Cons, we love them.
Controllers
yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to get you some Bally Junior wet wipes, that's what.
Yeah, totally. Bally, when do you predict that your son is going to break one of your controllers? How long will that take?
Soon. Like, it's going to be soon. Yeah. Or he's going to leave it so sticky I won't want to use it anymore or do something like that too. I reckon I've got a year and a half in the bag.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, it'll probably happen at some point. So you'll feel the joy as well of getting new controllers. But in any case, we've got video games to talk about on the show. Bally, do you want to tell the fine folks what today's podcast is going to be about?
First segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. For the second segment, we got some of your emails. And then for the third segment, we're going to have a little look back at our Game of the Year lists from 2014, which is actually the first year we kind of properly did it. Although the podcast did start in 2013. 2014 was like, right, we've been going a whole year. We're going to actually do a Game of the Year list for 2014. And yeah, some interesting lists. People might think, 2014, what was Nintendo even doing back then? And yep, you'd be right to ask that question. So we're going to jump to that.
Absolutely. So let's get into the video games, what we've been playing, and the big one, the main one, which people have continued to play and are playing more this weekend because the Splatfest is happening, is Splatoon 3. And Bally and I have both finished the single-player campaign for Splatoon 3. I actually went back and listened to us talking about the single player for Splatoon 2 just to refresh myself, because I was like, I remember coming out that thing not being very happy, right? Like and I think that's been my prevailing opinion since Splatoon 2 is like the single player was frustrating. It had like annoyances to it. I just found it like constantly moments of, you know, there were those moments, remember those levels with the hook shot thing where you would like shoot this thing and it would hook shot you midair and you have to like readjust your aim midair and then you would like just fall in a pit if you fucked it up. Like the reset on that, like having to go back to the start of the level, it was just like a lot of frustration basically.
I did love the final boss in Splatoon 2. I thought it was very impressive. It was quite a gauntlet. It felt like it was a much longer final boss than I feel like 3 was, and I think it was also a lot tougher.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I kind of came into Splatoon 3 being pretty negative, like in terms of like wanting to play the single player. I was like, I guess I'll go through it and just if I have to, but it doesn't seem like they've changed much.
And everyone was saying it's longer than the second game as well. So, okay, here we go.
and also after last podcast we discovered that there was lives and stuff like that, and I was like, well, this kind of sucks. It feels like they're just retreading the same ground. It's the same thing. I'm here to tell you that I was absolutely fucking wrong. Splatoon 3 has by far the best single player of the entire series, and honestly, like, one of the best single player campaigns that I've played from Nintendo in a while. I think that it has a lot of variety. Like, the challenge levels that they mix in with the regular levels are super interesting and very fun to pull off, and like do all these interesting challenges they build specifically around each super power up, each like sub power, like different weapons that you get to choose which ones you use, and the length of these levels as well is just like, it feels so bite-sized. Like those regular levels often felt like you were going through checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint, and they would never end. And a lot of these just feel super well paced, like just like Splatoon matches are only 3 minutes, and you kind of like get in there, get out. It feels like a lot of these levels are like that as well, and there are an abundance of levels across each island. So like, obviously the start of the game is slightly different because you start in this like separate area, and then you go through those kind of regular tutorial levels, and you fight that big boss at the end, and that's all good. And then everything kind of changes when you get underground and you get to that big kind of like set of islands, and you have the 6 islands to go through, and you have all the
it's a really nice looking area. Like, it's a good choice for what they've gone for.
Yeah, it's all kind of like white and kind of snowy almost, but you have the purple goo just like prevalent everywhere, and the kind of the hub areas themselves also hide a lot of secrets. So there's this real satisfaction to getting a bunch of orbs by completing levels, using those to clear out the goo, which, of course, classic me, I wanted to clear out all the goo on all the islands, right? Like, the one thing that Nintendo needed to do to get Splatoon to be something I liked was to make me clean things up, and classic, here's what they did. And then you like find these little parts in the ground. Your little buddy character can go around and find things as well. He'll like alert you if he's found a hidden thing in the ground. You find like pieces of lore. You find like a bunch of other extra bonus orbs, like those types of things you can explore. And they're little mini challenges within the hubs themselves, like the balloon challenges, where they're very much like speed based, and you have to kind of navigate all the way around one of those areas in order to complete the balloon challenges. Like, there's a lot of stuff that they kind of like pack in to just the overworld hub areas, and there's nothing like the satisfaction of like popping open a level for the first time. Like the sound design,
good sound design, so
like the tinniness of like as you're hitting the cap to like pop it off. It's always satisfying when you come across those. So I found myself like going across and just opening up all the levels, and then having those teleport points that you can kind of just jump to them whenever you want when you're ready to go through the levels. And yeah, I found it exceptionally well designed and incredibly fun, and just a lot of variety and just well paced throughout. How did you feel overall about this campaign, Bally?
I was obviously hotter on the first 2 games single player campaigns. I was really happy that people were saying some really nice things about this one. I was excited to try it. I was down in the Peak District, and I had my slots when I was looking after Bally Junior, where I had time and space to play this, and managed to wrap up the whole campaign in like, I don't know, 6 days or something. And
yeah,
I'm really, really impressed. Like, I agree that this is like some of the freshest Nintendo style design we've seen in a long time. Like, I wouldn't put it in the echelons of Luigi's Mansion 3 or
not quite
Mario Odyssey, but it's certainly just like a little rung below that, and it's really, really satisfying. And I think there's a lot of, it's almost treating these little test areas almost like shrines from, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, totally.
It's really taking like not just main weapons, but also sub weapons, and on top of sub weapons, it's also taking like special weapons, and then designing entire levels around the use of those weapons. Because the other 2 games really didn't do that much at all, and I think that with this game having so many interesting, cool sub and special weapons, not just regular weapons, like, I think that they've really utilized some really cool things you can do. Like, for example, I had like the curling stone that you like throw, and the whole level is just based on the curling stone. And then they made this rule that, and if you touch any like purple gloop, like the enemy gloop, you restart level, like you die. And I was like, wow, crap, okay, so I have to like perfectly throw these curling stones like through these like little mini maze puzzles, and then follow the ink around and complete it. And that's just one example, but there are like 30, 40 unique, very well designed, interesting uses of specific weapons.
Yes.
That are so bite sized. They rarely return like these ideas, and I think that's always a good strength in a Nintendo game where they take an idea, do something cool with it, and they don't feel the need to constantly go back to it. And yeah, those levels in particular are really cool. Now, there are some like more standardized levels where it's like get from point A to B and we're going to scatter a few enemies and maybe there's a bit of verticality in the level or whatever. And so there's definitely weaker levels, but obviously there's loads of weaker shrines in Zelda as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like this consistency necessarily, but
I think that was my problem with Splatoon 2 is that those levels you're describing, those just kind of like go through and kill the enemy levels where
felt like the vast majority.
Yes, absolutely. It felt like Splatoon 2 just did those and not really anything else.
Like over 80%. It had a few interesting levels, but the second you did one of those, you're like, oh, that was really fun. Now I have to do like 5 more of the less fun ones. Whereas this game, it's a lot more like, oh, what am I going to do next? What's it going to be? And I think the level of difficulty, maybe I've gotten a bit better at Splatoon, to be fair, but I think the level of difficulty as well on these, I was going to say shrines, on these levels is really, really like perfect for my personal ability level. I was dying a little bit. There were some tough ones.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? And this is a crucial thing for me that really changed my attitude towards dying in these stages, is that if you die, you can just pay some orbs and stay at the checkpoint that you're at. Now, obviously, it would be better if they just made you go back to the checkpoint and didn't have any lives. Of course, that is the optimal solution. But if they are going to want to still have lives and want a way around it, this is definitely the best way to do it.
It's like one team said, we've got to have lives, and the other team said, well, actually, you could just not have lives, and they've kind of reached this hybrid in the middle. It's much more close to the not have lives system, I guess. Because, I agree. It doesn't matter. And yes, there are some levels at the end, near the end, where they're a bit cheeky and they basically don't have checkpoints in the level, and the level is very much like a challenged level where it's like, right, you need to get from, there's one where you're grinding a really long time.
That's the exact one I was thinking about, where you have to like shoot all the boxes in a row and not miss any single box and like get right to the end without dying, essentially.
And I swear, like the last box on that before getting to the thing, that they're in like a really annoying place, and it definitely took me a few times, but I'll give them a pass. That's like a handful of levels, and I did enjoy the challenge. It's points in that Splatoon 2 campaign where it was like that level of challenge, but relentlessly level on level near the later levels. Right. So to do that was really satisfying. Here's a pet peeve I have with the whole of Splatoon. And it's more prominent in the single player campaign, and the other games do it, and a lot of Nintendo games do this. It's not just Splatoon, but I hate having like text boxes to read while I'm doing something action based.
Right.
And
yes.
Splatoon 3 is quite chatty. Like there's quite a lot of, oh, this is what you need to do. And you might be facing a boss and it's giving you tips on how to beat the boss mid boss fight while you're trying to like survive. And it's just like, right, can we just do some voice acting, please? Or can you just like space this out properly so that I can read the thing and then do the thing? I don't want to read the thing and do the thing at the same time, or just give me a bit of voice acting. It's just really, it's such a simple thing, but I constantly just felt frustrated by it on certain levels where the game's trying to give you like a little taster of advice, because it did it on lots of boss fights, but it also did it on lots of more tricky levels, and it's just, it's not big. This is a very small issue in the grand scheme of things.
Sure,
a bit annoying.
No, I totally get that, and I think it's always tricky. Like there's in Yakuza Like a Dragon, there's a system where they will have conversations while they're walking, and obviously I'm playing in Japanese, and so it's popping it up on like the left-hand side of the screen, but I'm also running around the city trying to not get into fights at the same time, and it's like that balance of, well, I guess I'll just stand in a corner and just read this, because otherwise I can't like continue playing the game. It's definitely something that I think, if they're going to do it, they should implement some kind of voice acting, but it doesn't make sense for them because they want to like have Splatoon be this like weird language, and it's this kind of whole history of the Earth and humans being dead and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't actually read too much of the lore stuff, but from what I've heard of people,
I didn't really either. I know some corners of the internet were quite excited about it, but I was like, I want to play these levels.
I think I'd probably rather just watch a YouTube video that breaks it all down than do it myself, but it sounds like really interesting, and I'm sure there's some cool stuff going on there, definitely. But
another vague criticism I'd have is I just would have loved 2 more boss fights, like just a little bit more, because they were some of the real highlights of that campaign, and there's 6 worlds. Why not just have one boss at the end of every world? Is that so much to ask for?
Yeah, it's like one every other world, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's 3 bosses for 6 worlds, basically.
Right.
And then you got the final boss as well. But yeah, I do agree. I think those were some of the strongest parts of the game.
No, the flip side of that is Nintendo often repeat bosses, so I wouldn't have wanted to have seen that. And
yeah, totally.
I'm glad there was no like boss rush at the end. So, but yeah, just a couple more because they were really cool.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely agree with that, and I think that those fights always have like a rhythm and a pattern to them, like Mario bosses, where it's like you got to do the thing 3 times. But I think they shake things up each phase and like make the design fun enough that you don't really mind that much. Like I'm totally cool with them sticking to that old school kind of boss design, as long as they do it strongly, and I think they do it very well each time they kind of deploy one of those. So yeah, I was a fan of what they did with them, and they were definitely some of the better parts of the game. But I also thought like the variety in terms of like what you're actually doing in different levels. Like there's one level where there's just a bunch of boxes and they're arranged in a pattern, and it's like, okay, make the other set of boxes into this exact same pattern, like you're almost sculpting a statue or something.
Yeah, that was
right?
very cool.
And it just let you approach the game in a totally different way. It's just like almost like pattern matching thing where you're going back to that one, looking at it, making sure that your shot is accurate so you don't accidentally break the wrong box, and that one, I could see how that one could get frustrating, because like if you've spent like 10 minutes perfectly doing it and you accidentally hit another box, you don't have a checkpoint for that level, so like that could be a point of frustration. But I do think that like having the one where it's that you have to paint the whole Moai statue, or
that's fun.
There's like there's one where it's more you're kind of like looking around this area to try and find keys, and it's a lot more maze-like almost, how do I get around this area? I can see where I need to get to, but where's like the point at which I need to get to it? Lots of just a bit more variety in terms of the style of gameplay that they're approaching, and not just full action shooting enemies the whole time. Like, because they have, even with the power-ups, like there's the Spider-Man power-up where you're like elastic and you're shooting yourself, and you can attach yourself to different sides and pillars and stuff, and that one almost felt like non-linear in the way that you could kind of approach it, and like the way to get to the goal.
There was one level using that Spider-Man style thing where they do like the skyscrapers, and they're definitely trying to evoke Spider-Man a lot more on that specific level, where they're asking you to like launch it mid-air basically to get it. But
yeah, totally.
I also think that even on some of the levels that are a little more enemy based, like there's some really nice uses of like those balloons that explode, and like there are so many uses of ways, so many places where you can just hit a single balloon and it'll explode and then wipe out a bunch of enemies at once.
Right.
Like enemies weren't just this thing they'd randomly lob into most levels just to add a bit of challenge. They'd often put them somewhere tactically where there's actually shortcuts to defeating them all, like in a really little kind of action puzzly kind of way, which was quite satisfying.
There was that power up or the sub weapon where you throw it and it bounces angles off of surfaces, right? And you like have to take out multiple enemies and line it up so all these balloons end up lining up in a row so that they explode and finally kind of cause a chain reaction type of thing. And that type of stuff I always felt was really fun.
Or there was one with literally like, it's like you have this much ink, and when you run out of ink it's game over, and you basically have to run through a gauntlet of enemies, and I was basically picking the hardest enemies. I was like, right, I'm gonna use my ink on that enemy because that one's a pain in the ass, and then I'm gonna dodge all these other ones, and you're like manically, it's when you really realize that like, without ink your character moves incredibly slowly in this game. Really just fun ideas.
Yeah, that level I found probably the most frustrating one in the game, I would say. Like it was
in the game, wow,
yeah. It was just like, man, it's because they take it all away from you, right? And you just have such limited resources.
Yeah, and there's no checkpoints in that one either. It's like just one thing. But
totally. I
also want to say that I maybe need to go back and see what Splatoon 2 looks like, but they are, and people do rightly criticize the Switch at this point in time for just not having enough oomph to do some very impressive things, but like they are squeezing every last bit of juice out of the system for this game, because it runs like a smooth 60, right? And it looks so good. Like the ink is so shiny, and sound design and the animations on like some of these boss fights are like really intense, and there's stuff splashing off everywhere, and I didn't get a single hitch, honestly. I don't know if you did, but like it ran so smooth.
I've weirdly started to get hitches in the lobby when I'm waiting for matches for some reason. Like when I load into the lobby, it'll start. That might be the online affecting that, I would say, not the game itself. But yeah, it does shock me almost that you have those sections like the last boss, which is like super visually impressive and a lot of shit popping off, and that runs smooth 60, and then you get into the plaza and it's still at 30, and I'm like, oh well, okay. I think partly the plaza thing is like number of characters standing around and like the online stuff to bring in all of the pictures and that sort of stuff.
I agree, but there's a lot of the equivalent of characters maybe like in some of these boss fights where there's just so much on the screen happening at different points, and it's still
totally
so smooth. Did you enjoy the final boss?
I loved it. Yeah, I think it is absolutely fantastic and just such a cool spectacle and visually impressive. Like, it kind of reminded me the end of Kirby from this year, you know, like it had a bit of those vibes to it in some senses. I really thought that, you know, that there's like a section after the final boss, which is not like a victory lap. It's almost like they kind of change up the mechanics in a weird way, and I didn't love that section, if I'm honest, because it was just a little frustrating to understand. But the kind of main final boss where you're just like in your squid form is definitely one of the best, I think, Nintendo bosses that I've played in a long time, and definitely. For me, overall, I was saying, like, you know, this is probably one of the better campaigns. Like, I think about what else have I played this year from Nintendo, and yeah, for me, this is well above Kirby in terms of a single-player campaign. Like, I enjoyed this a lot more than that.
Yeah, no, I had a better time as well, for sure. It maintained the freshness and kept me going in a way that Kirby didn't after the second or third world, you know.
Exactly.
And it's partly down to, you know, Kirby repeating a lot of ideas. And that it does make a game feel that little less exciting to play as you get further, whereas this campaign was relentless in trying new things, and as few boss fights as they are, they're really worth getting to. And I thought the final boss was really cool. I really loved the Splatoon 2 final boss. I don't know if I liked it more or less than this one. I think as a spectacle this one's much better, but I think as like a mechanically, like the gaming mechanics, I think I might prefer the second one, but that's not to say this one was still like really cool with that spectacle. And yeah, it's where like I mentioned Luigi's Mansion 3, Mario Odyssey, like it's quite rare that we get that Nintendo itch well and truly scratched, and like this single player game campaign really did it in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I think that was really cool, because you know, like this level of Nintendo production doesn't really come along overly often. Obviously, we get games like Metroid Dread last year or something. You know,
yes,
like,
totally.
It's maybe like once a year if you're lucky, kind of thing.
Right, totally. This has also made me interested in the Octo expansion, because supposedly a lot of the ideas that they're doing here with these like variety of levels and like taking different power-ups and stuff was started in the Octo expansion. However, what I've heard is the Octo expansion is also bullshit difficult, and I wonder if Octo expansion doesn't employ the checkpoint thing that this game does. So I might check it out because it's free with the Switch Online service, and I might just have a look and see. But yeah, it might be that this is the more refined version of the Octo expansion, in the sense that it's much more fair in terms of its difficulty balance, and it has like the checkpoint thing built in and those types of things. But I do kind of want to check it out now, just as a curiosity, because it seems like that's where they were figuring out
free access with the online pass, Switch Online.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes it a lot easier to approach. And I think that, you know, this campaign, it definitely feels like the longest one as well, but it also to me felt even shorter than Splatoon 2's because of how much I was enjoying it, I think, right? Like, I think that I was forcing myself to play Splatoon 2's campaign, whereas like once I got into the groove with Splatoon 3's, I was like, I actually want to do this instead of playing multiplayer tonight. And I think that's probably the biggest compliment I can give it, because at its core, I think Splatoon is like, I will always gravitate towards the multiplayer more personally, but the fact that it made me want to play that instead, I think says quite a lot about how high quality
I sacrificed playing taking part in the Splatfest to beat this campaign.
Yeah, totally.
It's
Splatfest still going. You can play some
still
today.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna play a bit more of Splatfest. Yeah, I did jump in. I think it's really cool what they've done with the plaza. Like, it is popping off. There are lights everywhere. It is just like a party city. You have like Fry and Shiver on these giant like dragon heads that are like floating around the city. Like, it is really visually impressive. And I think it's just...
Is it running at 30?
It still is, of course, yeah. But it's still really visually impressive, and I love, like, they take all the Miiverse style messages, and like they're all in like lights and colors and like LED like shining off walls. Yeah, I love what they do with Splatfest just as an idea, and it's just a really cool approach to take. I haven't tried the 3-way Splatfest thing yet, so I'm probably going to try some of that today. But yeah, you know, I think it's just a fun little tournament. I chose Grub, by the way, which supposedly was the least popular choice.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm surprised by that.
I went with fun, but, you know, we're video game enthusiasts. That's what it's all about, right?
That's true. Well, you've chosen the most popular team, Bally, so I'm sure you're going to win and get a lot of points from it. But yeah, Grub currently, I don't think we've won any matches so far, so I think all the shit people chose Grub, so that's me, just with the shit munchers. So yeah, I'm looking forward to checking a bit more Splatfest stuff, and, you know, personally, I do prefer playing ranked stuff to regular turf war, but it's nice that the Splatfest almost kind of unites everybody under, you know, the turf war banner for a little while, so you kind of get a bit more competition in that space, because I think a lot of the good players tend towards the kind of ranked matches, the anarchy battles,
and the Splatfest always sucks them back out into
exactly
turf war.
And so you have some dangerous games going on, which is good fun, and yeah, definitely keen to jump into more of that stuff, and just play more Splatoon 2. Splatoon 3, sorry. I somehow have played 25 hours of this game. I don't really know how. Like, it's just kind of happened.
I think I'm right up at like 18, 19.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know. Maybe that's how I put 60 hours into the second game and didn't realize it. I've kind of like accidentally put almost 30 hours into this one. And I think it's just like, that's the thing with multiplayer games, is there's a lot of like waiting around. Like, you're just kind of like the matches are 3 minutes and you're just kind of like in a lobby for a while,
reducing their times.
Yeah, so it almost feels like you're not playing for as long as you actually are, you know, which is interesting. But it's also like, it's a great podcast game to put on, so I will usually just be playing it in the evening in bed or whatever and have a podcast, and, you know, Splatoon 3 continues to be great.
I had a right moan, I think, before it came out. It's like, £60 is a lot to spend on this game. How can I do? And then it turned out it was like 45 on Amazon, and I'm already, that single player campaign alone, like, is worth 45 quid in my view. Like,
it's
on
really
top
good.
of all the great multiplayer that's still going. So I'm a lot less sour grapes than I was a few weeks ago, and I'm really pleased that this game has done that. And I think that the single player just really reinforced that, because it just felt fresh and new and exciting. And for a third game in the series, that's really cool.
I would say, as a whole package, this is the best Splatoon game. I think, like, in hindsight, I would say Splatoon 1 is better than Splatoon 2, honestly. Even, I think, but partially because they introduced Salmon Run, but then they made it shitty to access it. So, like, there was a cool thing at it, but then it was a bad implementation.
We need to do more Salmon Run. I had a really good time when we jumped in. That's
absolutely.
Really cool.
So, like, this one has the best single-player campaign, can play Salmon Run whenever you want, new weapons and stuff in multiplayer, as well as like the most maps they've ever had at launch. I would say the only drawback is they still don't have some of the best Splatoon 1 maps, which I still think Splatoon 1 has the best maps.
Some of those, I think some of the maps, I agree, they've kind of maybe overcomplicated a bit, and some of those simpler first game where it's really good. You're also forgetting, like, there's a Mario Sunshine reference, and that definitely makes this the best Splatoon game.
Of course, actually, so I'm that's going to make it the worst Splatoon game now. Actually, I'm revising my rankings.
You enjoyed that Mario Sunshine reference.
I enjoy streaming Mario Sunshine. All right, it's very different to enjoy playing the game itself. Streaming is a different experience. But hell, you know, I got a good chuckle when that boss showed up, and I was like, are we fucking really doing this game? Yeah, they are. They did. Cool. And it was fun. It was a fun reference for sure. So yeah, Splatoon 3, a bona fide hit. You know, and if you're out there thinking like, well, should I just get Splatoon 2 instead of Splatoon 3? I would say no. At this point, the community has moved over to Splatoon 3. If you're kind of like hovering or like wavering and you haven't jumped in yet, just jump in with 3. 3 is the best one overall and has the best stuff, and yeah, it's the most refined. They've kind of, that's maybe the benefit of an iterative franchise like this, is that you get to really like dig in and make those kind of changes that refine it to a point where it's like almost perfect, you know? I think that's what they're
very impressed.
So yeah. Well, we have another game to talk about that we both played, which is very fun.
Mentioned it briefly last time, but now we've both beaten it.
Yes, we both played through Tinykin, which is I'm going to say a platformer that has Pikmin elements, right? Far more of a Mario Odyssey than a Pikmin 3. And I think it blends those ideas quite nicely. But yeah, Bally, do you want to maybe talk through like your thoughts on this game? Because I know you're very, very hot on it.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed by the opening, like last time, that opening world. And I'm pleased to say like the worlds get bigger and more impressive. I think the fundamentals of what you're doing don't really change. And I don't think the gameplay loop necessarily changes, and that's okay, I think, because this is like a 5 to 7 hour game. Like, it's not too long. But in terms of like having a large, like, so there's multiple like worlds, and each world is like a room, like in a house.
It's basically Toy Story, right?
Toy Story,
where like but you're even smaller than that because you're almost bug sized, basically. So these household rooms all are absolutely ginormous.
Yeah, and I like the way you traverse these rooms doesn't change a ton in my view, and like you can get upgrades that increase the length you can glide, and that's very satisfying. But like the strongest aspect of this game, I think, is just it's the running around and the verticality, and like actually thinking, I need to get up there. How do I do that? And I've not had that feeling since like Mario Odyssey, and I'm referencing Mario Odyssey a lot. I think it says something how much I like that game. But,
yeah, totally.
This game really is good at the exploration platforming. Like, there's not a ton of challenge, and you can unlock so many like shortcuts to get back up to places. So as long as you've got the shortcut, there's not a ton of penalty for falling all the way down. Even if you fall to your death, you literally instantly respawn with no life system right back to where you made the jump. So
exactly,
it's really encouraging being experimental, taking risks, being like, oh, I could reach that. Let's give it a go. And then if you fail, doesn't matter. You just respawn right back. I don't think the game in the later worlds does anything that makes me go, oh, that's a cool like final thing that I'm glad it did or didn't do, you know. Like it kind of just, it's like, yep, this is what we're doing, and this is really strong, and I'm enjoying it, and now the game's going to end, kind of, and that's it, and that's fine. Like I wasn't too disappointed with like the way things wrapped up, because ultimately there's no enemies, there's no boss fights, which is an interesting take, to be honest, because so many games these days will put in enemies, often maybe for the sake of it, arguably, or it's not fundamental to the mechanics. And this game's just like, no, we're collecting, we're platforming, and we're exploring. Like, that's what this game is about. And I think that reminds me of, like, you know, Spyro, you know, like I think Spyro would be an interesting, fun game to play even without enemies, but they have enemies, and this game just kind of takes the Spyro element of collecting, and then as obviously this is a lot more vertical, and this is like one of my the best surprise of the year potentially for me, like so far. Like it's a game I didn't know about, and then I saw, I think it was Ben Hansen on MinMax mention, and I looked it up and I was like, this looks amazing. And I will say the trailers don't really do it justice. Like this game visually, and I was playing on Series X, but this game visually looks very impressive, like it's really stunning. Nice surfaces. So I was hugely impressed by this game, and I need more exploration platforming in my life. I love it.
Yeah, it was almost an instant like feel thing when you jump in of like, oh, okay, yeah, this feels good to run around. The jumping is great. Like there's instant satisfaction. But then crucially for me, you get the soap board, which is like you basically just use it to slide around and move places faster. And you know me, Bally, like as soon as I get a movement tool that lets me go faster than the regular walking speed, I'm absolutely on it. So that was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm in. You know, as soon as they gave me that soap board, I was like, all right. And the nice thing about it is that you can also, like, I would love to see a speedrun of this game, because like there's the edges of like desks or tables or chairs or whatever, you can slide and you go way faster. So you can like go regular fast speed on the soap board, but then if you find an edge, you just start kind of rapidly racing along areas, which is like really satisfying. But there's also, I think the design is very clever in the way that it almost, it has like every level almost has like a central hub area, and you find these little string areas, these little string kind of globules, and if you use one of your bomb Tinykin on them, they explode and they turn into like a what the hell is that creature, like a thread bug kind of thing, and they like shoot out these silver basically but they shoot out like these silver threads, and those threads almost like all go from these like the corners of the room all the way to the center, so you basically have like a quick travel to get back to those really high areas, you know? So like it almost forces you to do the puzzle aspect to get up there yourself. But then once you've got to the top, you can activate this grind rail, and it gives you a shortcut to get back up there if you want to quickly check something, or you're like, oh, that's where the mailbox is, so I need to post the letters there and stuff like that. And I do like the variety of different Tinykins, trying not to call them Pikmin. It's the same problem with the Wild Heart last year, where, you know, they're clearly Pikmin, but you're just going to be called by another name. So there's different varieties, and they do different things, but the difference is there's not much micromanagement here. Everything is very contextual. So like if you see a I don't know, like a little ring on the ground, right? There are bridge ones which will turn into a bridge. So you basically just point your controller at it, hold down the trigger, and then you just automatically will just start shooting out the correct one. Same with stuff that explodes. So like if it's a bomb one that's going to be used on it, it will just automatically switch to the bomb Tinykin, and you know, you can just keep chucking them, which basically makes it a very fast-paced experience. You don't have to you don't have that downtime of like micromanaging what you're going to use on what, and that kind of like smart adaptive system makes it a lot more seamless and fluid and more like a platformer in the way where it's just not asking you to do that kind of like task stuff.
Like the pace of Pikmin works for Pikmin, but if Pikmin suddenly asked you to platform around the world really fast, you'd be infuriated at the speed at which the Pikmin are responsive, the way you have to manage them, the day and night cycle. Like this game just throws all that to the side, and as you say, it's just contextual. Like, right, if you're in this moment, you're going to use your Tinykin now. Did you I'm gonna guess your favorite, and my favorite type of Tinykin was definitely the green ones that stack as a ladder.
Yes.
Did you use the trick where you just hold the right trigger and you immediately? Yeah. Oh my! When I discovered that, I was like, "This is amazing!"
Yes.
And that's something where the other abilities, like the bomb and the carrying ones and the ones that make a bridge, they all felt very Pikmin-like. I've kind of seen this before, whereas the green ones that you use as a ladder to stack, and you just basically give yourself a diving off point for gliding and jumping, like they were really satisfying to find and to use, and felt very innovative for what this game's asking you to do. And like I said, this game's a lot about verticality. So what's better than Tinykin that help you traverse the world vertically? You know, like it's just such a great idea.
They give you a height advantage in situations where you otherwise wouldn't have it, and you know, obviously they build it into the design, but it almost feels like you're getting one over on the level design in a sense sometimes, which is always a smart thing to do. But yeah, I think the other aspect of it is like how satisfying the sound design is when you're stacking as well. The little blah 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 blah, like as it goes
really
up,
nice.
like loads of great sound design in this game. Every time you find the little eggs for each Tinykin, like just collecting those, and the popcorn. Holy shit! I call it popcorn. It's like, I think it's supposed to be like, I don't know, like wax or something. I'm not sure. Like the golden popcorn looking collectibles, which are basically like, I don't know.
Oh, it's
coins.
nectar. It's like pollen or something.
Oh, pollen. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's golden popcorn to me. But it was always when you find those, like they lead your eye. Those are the kind of things that like suggest you've been to an area or not been to an area, and like it's a really good tool to like figure out, have you explored the space? Not
just to actually collect them all and increase your gliding, but as you say, just as a guide to say whether you've been somewhere or not.
Yeah, totally.
And maybe how many gliding bonus power-ups did you get in the end?
I had 7, so I didn't get the final one.
I only had 5, but yeah.
Oh wow,
that was very satisfying to try and get them. And I wasn't like, right, I'm gonna get 900 or whatever. I think if I got close to like 700-800, I'd be like, right, now I'm gonna dig in and try and get this power up because I'm almost there, sort of thing.
Yeah, I managed to get them in, I think, every world, the base worlds anyway. I had a trouble. Basically, I had gotten to like the 4th world and still only had 2, and I was like, how do I where do I get these? And I maybe it's because I was just button mashing through dialogue, and I basically read none of it the whole game because I just didn't give a shit.
It's a little bit overly chatty.
It's a little wordy. Game, I was like, I'm just here for platforming. Leave me the fuck alone. So I didn't listen to any. I literally have no idea what the story is, if I'm honest. I basically just.
The story is very strange. It was very weird. I don't get it.
Yeah. There was a secret passage thing I found in, I think, the last level, where it was like, I saw something, I was like, this is bizarre, what the hell's going on here? And I'm not sure if you found that area, but yeah, that kind of clued me in a little bit of what was going on, but still I don't really have much of a clue, if I'm honest. But yeah, I had to go look up online, like, how do I get more bubbles? Because I kept going back to the hub area and being like, no one here talks. Like, I try to talk to the guy who, does the artifacts, or the guy who has the popcorn jars. I'm like, who's gonna give me more bottles? Because I totally forgot from the start of the game. And that guy is basically in levels with his little stall, and you have to find him within the level at his stall. But because I wasn't talking to any NPCs ever, I just kind of like ignored all the NPCs. So I basically just like got to that 5th or 4th level and had to look up online, because I was like, I need 5 bubbles? I mean, I've done a lot of levels. How do I get fucking bubbles?
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's a lot
there are so many NPCs in this game. And I think what's really impressive is the number of, like, nooks and crannies and rooms of, like, wow, this really does feel almost like a Bug's Life, and these kind of things where, like, there's like a random bar in this little nook that I found in this gargantuan room that we're exploring. And, like, there's often, like, nooks within nooks as well. Like, it's just, there's so much... like life going on in these worlds, and it's not, I think it might have felt very empty and quite cold and a bit eerie had it been completely empty. So I think that the fact they chose to create these little, like a mini like hotel and a bar and a little restaurant and a little this, that and the other, like really kind of lived in worlds, I think was just a really nice touch.
Yeah, it gives a sense of the society of like bugs living within the spaces that humans also live within, right? Which is very, very interesting. And yeah, I don't know. I wonder if in their kind of early design they were like, you're fighting bugs, but then they're like, no, we're not going to fight them, but maybe we just still keep them in there as like flavor to the world and stuff like that. Yeah, it is really interesting that there's zero combat in this game, that it is purely puzzling and platforming and just exploring.
Yeah. How many action games these days have zero combat? Like, when I say action, I just mean like non-strategy.
Yeah, any video game, basically, you're fighting something. So I think it is quite unique that you're just kind of like finding stuff basically and like solving problems. And that's kind of the core of each level, is like, okay, we have a problem to solve. We need to do this race, but the train's stuck, and where's the track piece that's missing? And also we need the car, but we also need the trophy. And these are the things that are kind of like populated throughout the world.
One criticism I have, and this is something I think that the Mario games started, I want to say from Sunshine, actually. I could be wrong. Maybe 64 did it as well, but when there's something activated in the world or you've got a goal to reach, I really like it when the camera zooms in on the thing and then it'll pan to you.
Yeah, so you have a relative point of where you're going. Yeah.
You have a relative reference point as to where the hell this thing is in reference to you. This game does like hard black fade to color cuts between things that you're meant to go to and yourself, and that really on the larger levels that just completely took me out of it. So like, right, that's where I need to go, but where is that? Like, I have no idea.
Did that screw you over on when you had to take the car to the mechanic to get it fixed? Because I had no fucking idea where that car had gone.
Yeah, totally. I'd like done something to unlock the car, and I'm like, where is that car? Like, and this room is big. Like, it took me, I just had to just explore the room, and I like, that's the fun of the game. I get it, like exploring, fine. But like when I'm told to do something specific, I really like when the camera just pans and gives you a sense of what you're meant to do. And I'm pretty sure Sunshine might be in the first game to do this, actually. But it's a crucial part of a game like Mario Odyssey, as much as I'm referencing that game.
Yeah. For me, that's the weakest element, though, right? Is like, I love the start. The start of a level is always the best because there's unexplored space and there's you're getting stuff constantly and the dopamine is hitting because you're getting the golden popcorn and it's awesome. When you get to the end of a level and you're still trying to find that one thing, that for me is where the frustration starts to set in, and I'm like, oh, I just have to keep going. I don't know where it is, and it just like to keep trying to find, did I miss like a secret passage or something? That's where it kind of bumps up a little bit for me. The other thing I want to make note is, unfortunately, for some reason, this game gave me a headache, and I don't know why. So if I played it for more than an hour, I just felt really bad and my head would just start pounding, and I think it might be a camera thing with like maybe the motion on how quick the camera panning is or something, but something about it just really gave like motion sickness that I usually get from first person games. God. But for some reason I got it here, and I don't really know.
Is this the first time a non-first person game's done this to you?
No, I think it's happened with other games, and I can't bring any to mind, but it happens very rarely. Right. I really don't know what the cause is, but yeah, it was just a little bit of a dampener because I did want to continue and finish the game, but it took me a bit longer than I would have liked just because my head was
Did you have your frame rate turned up higher than 60?
Yeah, it could have been. I was 120, so it was like extremely smooth in a way that maybe was overkill for a game like this.
I'll blame that.
Yeah, that certainly could be an issue. Yeah, I wouldn't put it against it. So yeah, But yeah, I do think that that's probably the one drawback for me personally, which I get, it's no fault of the game. It's just, the way my brain works with video games sometimes is it does that. And I would say that, like, it doesn't change mechanically that much. Like, I would say that the Tinykin are interesting in what they can do, but ultimately I don't think it changes what you do that much, right? Because usually it's like, okay, we need to get this thing across this area, so we're just going to use the bridge to do it. Yeah. And that's just a case of standing there and making a bridge, and there's not much interest. Like, I'd say the electric one, they're a little more interesting. You kind of have to make your own path to move them. But, like, by the end of the game, I was like, the last level is quite big, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of ready for this to wrap up now. Like, I was almost, if there'd been one more level, I think I might have started dipping into the negative on this game, because it's like, we're kind of just going through the motions at this point. It's a lot of similar stuff. As enjoyable as it is, it just kind of, like, didn't feel like it was varying up enough for me.
I could have done with one more type of Tinykin that gave me as much wow as the green ones.
Yeah, definitely.
The electricity was decent, the bridge was fine, but like I just when you first get those green ones, you're like, wow, this really changes the way that I traverse this world in a way these other Tinykin don't. And
like a grappling hook set or something that you could attach to ceilings, or
something, or some like, I know you can glide in this game, but something that, like, what about like the pathless, like a type that, like, gives you more elevation while you're gliding or something. I don't know, but maybe that breaks the whole game to a degree. But could have been on the last level. I don't know, but
right, totally.
Video game designers over here, armchair game designers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we know.
But just so impressed overall, and 3D platformers in the indie space are kind of not as frequent as you might think, and I think that
they're also usually lower quality, I find, right?
Yeah.
Like, they go for the kind of 3D, almost N64 stuff. Like, A Hat in Time is a great example of, like, one of the only ones that I think has broken out truly and people actually really like. But I always see, like, really kind of jank, almost bad looking 3D platformers. And this one, with its style it's taken, which is basically Paper Mario aesthetically for the characters, but then the worlds being kind of 3D.
There's some very impressive lighting in these rooms that really make them feel appealing and fun to explore.
Like,
rather
the carpets
than
look really good, like some of these spaces, the 3D kind of elements look really sharp.
The furry carpets was the one thing that made my frame rate dip the slightest little bit.
Okay.
Just the carpet, that was the one thing in the whole game.
Damn.
But yeah, because I saw them, the team, I can't remember who the team are, but I saw them tweet like some earlier in design images. That's a famous topic this week.
Yes.
And the levels just looked really, like, starkly barren and pale and pasty, and they just really, like, added these really cool, like, atmospheric lighting and changed the textures on the surface to make it just look really appealing. And like I was saying before, like, I lived in space, and, like, I think that they've done a great job of just, like, a really, really good looking indie game. It's always great to see good looking indie games, but
for sure, yeah,
especially with like 3D platformers, I think as indies are having more and more access to more impressive development tools, and indie games are visually looking better and better, I think that can only be a good thing in the long run for 3D platformers, because I can imagine that it's quite a lot to bite off as an indie developer potentially versus a 2D platformer.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Tinykin, there you go. It's very good. We enjoyed it.
Go play it. It's on Switch. I hear it runs really well on Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. So check it out. Definitely seems like a good handheld game.
It had a lot of TNL energy, this game. I was very
impressed. It was good stuff. Cool. Last thing that I want to touch on is I went to EGX. I went there twice. Once
one games convention after another.
I know, non-stop. So once for business, once for fun. So yesterday I was there just hanging out and meeting Jordan from the Game for All podcast, who I'd been a guest on before. It was good, just kind of chatting and then also playing some stuff. We got to play Sonic Frontiers.
Wow.
Everyone's favorite game. You know what? Like, I was walking into this being like, this is gonna be a fucking trash fire. I just can't wait to dunk on this. And you know what, Bally? It's kind of fun. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it plays.
Feels good, or it looks good?
I mean, both, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, like, my hopes for the Switch version are very low because, like, I don't know, trying to pull off this, like, big world and what they're doing on the Switch, I think, already from the footage we've seen is, like, it's going to be pretty fucking rough, I think.
See, the Splatoon 3 team need to give these other developers their tools to, you know, get these games to juice a bit better.
Exactly. But yeah, I think it kind of, like, is pretty fun. Like, it's fun to, like, run around a bit. It almost feels like open world was built for what Sonic was really built for, because the idea of speed and just non-stop, like without barriers in your way and that sort of thing.
It's only now we can actually render those worlds in time for
right, exactly,
to run through them.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, you have like a boost button on your trigger, and you can like dash between like rings in the sky and stuff like that. And the combat like has almost a I don't know, it's like a mix between Zelda and Devil May Cry, where you have a lock on, so you're easily able to kind of run around enemies, but then you like jump in to hit them, and Sonic is just like in the air, kind of like doing Dante moves, just like hitting people. There's also this new mechanic, which is like a circle you draw on the ground. So by holding the Y button, you basically start drawing this blue dashed line behind you, and you draw a circle. And when you draw a circle, if there's no enemies, then it just makes rings. It just creates rings, I think, because that was what was happening. And then if you go around an enemy, it will basically damage that enemy by doing like kind of like circular damage. So if you have like 3 enemies, you can attack them individually, or you can kind of basically stun them by going around in this circle and taking this big kind of blue ring around them and stunning them in place, and then kind of attacking them after that. And yeah, it was a very short demo. It was only like 10 minutes or so, so just had a bit of time to get used to the controls and go around. There are a few kind of like environmental puzzles where you're like stepping on switches, or like going in a circle around 3 torches, like the kind of like mini Breath of the Wild style puzzles that you would find you know, in that game. But there's also, I guess, their equivalent of a shrine, which is basically find the keys for this thing, the statue area, and then it will warp you to like a regular Sonic level. And I start playing the Sonic level, and I'm like, oh, this is basically like Sonic Adventure 2, the rail grinding stuff, right?
Oh, okay.
Like it basically, I guess it feels a bit more like Generations, because that was when they brought in the homing stuff. Or I guess, did Adventure 2 Battle have the homing stuff where you'd have enemies and you just home in on them?
Yeah, definitely,
and chain them together? I think that's been around for a little while, actually, hasn't it, with 3D Sonic? But yeah, that felt like, okay, this is just a more traditional Sonic level, and it felt about as average as every 3D Sonic level has ever been, if I'm honest. Like, there was a bit of funkiness with like jumping. Like, I was trying to jump between rails, but then I realized you just have to tap the analog stick to jump between rails. You don't need to actually press the A button. So yeah, it was look, I came out of it being like, this game might be okay, which I think for a Sonic game is probably the best praise you can get, honestly. So
7 out of 10, high 70s.
I think this game would be overjoyed to get a 7 out of 10, is what I'm thinking, basically. Okay. And I think that's possible. I think it's very possible for this game to get a 7 out of 10, you know. But yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes, because a very brief kind of snippet, didn't get to play too much. So anyway, nice. I've now experienced it, and it's better than I thought. So that's good. Also got to play the new Chucklefish game that is coming out, I don't know when, but hopefully sometime soon, called Wildfrost.
And this is developed by Chucklefish, not just published.
No, it is not. It is not. It is actually published by Chucklefish.
Just published, okay.
Yes, and I was talking to one of the folks there who's running the booth, and it was funny because I had a meeting the previous day with someone who previously used to work at Chucklefish, who is now pitching a new game, cool. And then I was just chatting to him about that, and that was interesting. Yeah, just very interesting, like small little world with the video game industry when it comes down to it. But yeah, played Wildfrost, and it is a card game in the vein of Slay the Spire, roguelike deck-based game, and it's interesting in that when you look at it, it almost looks like, you know, it looks like Hearthstone, where you have your cards at the front and enemy cards at the back. And when I got into it, what I realized is, no, it's actually more like Slay the Spire, where you're on the left-hand side and your enemy's on the right-hand side, but both of you have 2 lanes. So that's kind of the way that it's built out. You basically have like a top lane and a bottom lane on your left-hand side, and the enemy has top and bottom on their right-hand side. So it's almost like you are basically doing like a Slay the Spire left to right thing, where you have your cards set up with your kind of character cards, but then you can also play attack cards from the bottom. So your character cards have like a countdown timer on them to when they will attack, but then you can also just like play regular like attack cards from the bottom. So it's a bit of a combination of a couple of different things, right? Like it has the characters attacking, but then also you can play cards to attack individually, and you have like healing stuff and all that sort of thing. I couldn't really figure out how much like mana I had left, or like what it was using to determine how many cards I could play per round and that sort of thing. And there's like a redraw mechanic when you run out, and when to use that and when to not use that. I wasn't really, you know, you're trying to learn something quickly, you know, as you first jump into it, and I didn't get a full grasp on it. But I was really enjoying it. It is so so satisfying in its polish, like the just like plomping down cards and the animations on them, incredibly sharp, incredibly crisp, like looked really fantastic, and had that kind of juice that you want out of these kind of games. And I got all the way to the final boss of the first kind of area, and it just absolutely curb stomped me. So I think I would have to like spend a bit more time figuring out what the actual kind of strategy is here, because it did feel like a little bit out of balance, just because with the information that I had, I was like, how the hell was I even supposed to get through this situation? But maybe it was like a certain strategical thing that I was missing.
I did kind of feel like that the first time I played Slay the Spire, and it all did become clear. So maybe it's along those lines.
Could certainly be the case. So yeah, but I'm looking forward to checking that out when it comes out, and hopefully it is good, because it feels like it's riffing on very familiar territory, but I think visually it stands out tremendously. It's just really gorgeous, but then it also has like some slightly different ideas in the way that it's approaching this kind of game. So yeah, very, very curious about that game and how it does. And that was probably the favorite thing that I played from the show. I also played Planet of Lana, a game that I know you're very excited about, Bally. And I think it's good. I have question marks about it. I was a little, not underwhelmed, but I was like, this feels like it could have some issues, basically. And I think partially it is, I mean, first of all, the game is absolutely fucking gorgeous. Like, it is, watching it in full resolution on a proper screen is just like, wow, this game pops beautifully. The backgrounds, the foreground, all of it, animation.
What were you playing it on?
I think it was a PC. It was a bunch of PCs, basically, hooked up with controllers and stuff. But it was, absolutely stunning. And I think it's one of those games where they almost prioritize animation over game feel.
I was going to say that. That's my one concern, is that, this is really pretty. It might even have quite a good story, but then are the 2D kind of, it's almost like platforming puzzle mechanics, right? Like, do they stick the landing?
I would say it's more a puzzle game than a platformer. Right. Like, platforming is an element, but it's more about figuring out how do you progress forward using your little buddy who's with you, who you can kind of send in directions.
Kind of like Inside, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think the thing that Inside had was it had that great animation, but it also had the game feel to back it up, right? As well as the incredible puzzle design. Like, Inside was just like the full package when it came to this type of game. And this kind of is trying to do that. But you have moments where you're like, okay, I'm going to jump for this ledge, and I press the button, but then the character like takes a bit of time to jump, and they jump too late, and you're like, okay, like it feels like they prioritized over animating over the actual feel of the game, which is fine, because at the moment it was like very slow-paced puzzles, and so it didn't matter that much, but I could see that becoming a problem later on. The other issue is that, like, you have this buddy and you basically control him by pressing the B button to get him to stay somewhere, or holding it to get him to follow you, but then you can also use your analog stick to like point in directions and use the A button to like place him in areas, and it just felt a bit finicky, and like your character starts like pointing around the screen, and then this kind of beam of light starts like moving around, and it's like kind of like rapid and hard to place like where you want to put it. So it just felt a little bit janky in terms of that stuff. And I don't know, if I think even in those early puzzles, there was one puzzle that I came across that was like, I got stuck on it for like 5 minutes, and Jordan was like watching me play at the same time, and we're like, what the hell do I do here? Like, it didn't make any sense. And it was because I had gone, instead of going underneath a thing, I'd gone above a thing, and therefore my companion had followed me and then not triggered a thing that it should have triggered. And I think the design there just like kind of made me confused for a while, and I kind of almost accidentally stumbled upon a solution. I was like, oh, okay, I mean, I guess, but like, it wasn't very clear is what I'm saying.
I think what Inside does really well is that because it's got that good base level feel, it can do action based like puzzles as well as like very slow paced puzzles at like the same rate. Whereas the concern is, if the feel isn't good, that might work fine on the slower puzzles, but the second the game might demand like a little action sequence or an action puzzle,
right,
it'll just fall flat on its face is the concern, I guess. And this game might not even have any action puzzles, who knows?
Yeah, it might just be this pace the whole game, it'll be fine.
I think it'd be like, I personally like the pacing of Inside, like if it went for the combination of action and some more slow puzzles. But yeah, interesting. Yeah. Maybe, come launch it'll feel great, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, who knows? A lot of this stuff kind of will get fixed over time, and game development is one of those things that even early in or close to launch products aren't exactly the same as what comes out at the start, because things get patched all the time, and it's the way of the industry. But yeah, I would say it kind of just like lowered my expectations for this game a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, I was looking forward to this, but now I'm just like, maybe just like tempering my expectations. I don't think it will maybe hit in the way I'm expecting it to.
I think it's Game Pass day one anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't lose anything from just checking it out and seeing. So I'll definitely check it out, I think, when it does come out. But yeah, that's pretty much everything. I did play Street Fighter 6 as well, which man, I kind of want to get into that game. It feels really fucking good. Like, it looks gorgeous, like really fun. I was playing against a French guy who said he played a bunch of Guilty Gear, and he also said he played Smash in the past and stuff. I was like, I only basically play Smash, and I'm kind of like sub-average at it. But I know the basics of Street Fighter of like, I know how to block, of like you have to hold back on the stick to like block, and you have to do high, medium, low, and that sort of stuff. So I was holding my own a little bit. I played as Chun-Li first round, and I played as Kimberly, and I played as Jamie, I think, the two new characters, or two of the new characters in the demo, and they all felt very different, very cool, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun, and if they have an interesting single player, I feel like Street Fighter 6 might be, I think a lot of people gonna get in the ground floor with fighting games with this game, because it feels exciting, and it looks amazing, and just has really good feel to it. So yeah, I'm actually quite interested in that. So that was good fun, and yeah, that's pretty much all I did in terms of play and stuff. Those were the ones that I wanted to hit mainly, was Planet of Lana and Wildfrost, and Sonic was kind of a little bonus in there. But
nice.
Yeah, looking forward to
quite a small show floor you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like old games there and stuff like that, and you know, not a huge amount.
Splatoon 3 was
cool
there.
Stuff. Yeah, Splatoon 3.
Did Nintendo have much more presence than that?
No,
or?
they, you know, you could play hot bangers like Mario 64 in the free play area, where Nintendo just had a bunch of Switches with a bunch of random games like Yoshi's Woolly World, Yoshi's Crafted World. They had Pokemon, I think Diamond and Pearl, like. They had, I think, not Hey You Pikachu, fucking Let's Go Pikachu. That'd be great. Look, if they had a Hey You Pikachu, I'd be standing in line to play that thing, you know. They didn't. So yeah, they basically just had a bunch of old games there, because I was like, Nintendo, you could bring a demo for Bayonetta, you know, something like that. Come on, man, throw me a bone here. But no, they didn't have anything fun, unfortunately. So yeah, not much else. So yeah, there you go. That was good fun. Enjoyed it, and yeah, it was a good time. So I would say I wouldn't go there for 4 days though, because it's open for 4 days. And I don't think you can I think you kind of do everything in one day. You can even do everything in the morning if you're fast enough, you know, and you're just kind of going for things, you know, unless you're standing in line for like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which had the longest line by far. Which still baffles me. It's like, it's a Call of Duty game. You fucking know what it's going to be like. It's going to be like Modern Warfare 1, but like a little bit different. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I'd say go to those conventions is fun. It's a good thing to hang out.
This was local for you as well. So
yeah, exactly. It's very easy for me to get to. So yeah, worth doing. Well, that's going to do us for the first segment of the show. We'll be back though after the break, and we're going to take some of your emails. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is time for your emails. We always need some more emails. We're getting lowish, I think.
Ish, yeah,
Ish. Yeah. So if you would like to send an email into the show, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. You can also join our Discord server, link to that in the show notes, but we'd also like to say there's a channel in the Discord server where you can post emails, questions, comments. We'd love to hear them, and we can bring them into this segment as well.
Absolutely.
Our first email is from Wicked Gamer UK Alan, who's from the UK. It says, "Hey MZ and Bally, after a long hiatus, i.e. the global pandemic, I find myself back to travelling more. A lot of my travel includes international flights. Having more than several hours to kill during my travels has rekindled my love for the Switch and reminded me of the reason it's called the Switch. The simple fact that I can play Xenoblade 3 in the comfort of my home, then seamlessly pick up right where I left off while I'm waiting for a flight or 35k feet in the air is the ultimate selling point of the console. Yes, I know the Steam Deck exists and is, for the most part, offering the same experience as the Switch, but better, to be honest. But given that this is your Nintendo podcast, here's my questions. As we shift back to going into work or traveling or what have you, what games have you found to be the reason the promise of the Switch was fulfilled? Shall we do that one first and then jump into the next one?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think that... For me, I have been traveling back, but less so. Like it's a little less frequent, and I think it's partially because of what the pandemic has done and affected, the way that people have started to work. Is like everyone now has a bit more of a hybrid approach. Generally, I think from company standpoints of like, yeah, you can basically mostly be remote, but then you can also come in if you want to, and there are like certain days that you should come in, or like certain number of days that you should do. And I don't know, there are certain places that probably have gone back in full time. There are certain service jobs, for example, where you kind of have to be, because that's the entire thing is you have to be there to do those jobs. But certain other ones you don't. And in my case, I am doing 1 day a week, sometimes 2, depends. And I, take the London Underground, and the London Underground is, it can be very, lacking for space in terms of being able to like sit somewhere or stand somewhere conveniently and play something. And I think because the Switch and the Steam Deck are actually quite large as devices, I don't know that even before the pandemic, I would have been taking my Switch on that type of travel. I think in terms of like other types of travel, like, going abroad or going on holiday, it makes a lot more sense. And it's also like, for example, when I was traveling to Edinburgh and then back again on the train, it was fucking amazing to have a Switch and just to be playing Live Alive the whole way. I literally did nothing else. All I did was play Live Alive, had like a podcast in for some of it, was listening to the music for some of it, but I also had a an outlet plug, so I could just plug. That's the lovely thing about modernization with travel, is that there is electricity within planes and trains now, so you have the ability. Sometimes. You don't even sometimes, yes, it's not always, it's getting more frequent, but you basically have the ability now. Even so, you can take it. You and I both have a massive power bank, which I actually currently don't have mine because my sister is in.
That thing is I love that thing.
Yeah, my sister is in South. She's in South America and she's traveling a ton, so she basically commandeered it from me. So fair enough, because she does way more traveling than I do. Which she'll get a lot more usage out of it. But having stuff like that is helpful, and it means that you can legitimately have these consoles be like handheld things, and and I think it is definitely fulfilled the promise of what the Switch is. And for me, the best memory I have of playing a Switch where it's like, wow, there are a couple for me. One of them was going to America and playing Astral Chain on the plane. Astral Chain, like a big flashy action game that you would expect to play on a TV, that still looks fantastic on the Switch screen, absolutely gorgeous, and like having it with the stand on the little table on the airplane, having my Switch Pro controller out, headphones in, like it's almost like you're at home playing a game. Like obviously not, because the screen's not as big and stuff like that, but the experience of being on a plane and playing a game like that, like a bigger game that you wouldn't necessarily have played handheld before, is just, there's something about it that is almost more engaging. The kind of like handheld games in the past have always been great, but there was something about them, I think, that never like kind of almost drew you in the same way, whereas with games like that, and the similar example is when we were driving down to London in December 2017 when Xenoblade 2 had just come out, and I was just playing for like 4-5 hours straight in the car ride. Somehow I managed to not feel sick while doing that, because it's very rare for me to be able to. But I was just so
Xenoblade is.
Yeah, I was so fucking enraptured by, and Xenoblade is the game that melts time as well. So I was like, holy shit, we're there. We just made it there, and I didn't even realize it. And I've just been playing Xenoblade this entire time, and it's just amazing. Like, it makes time melt. And it was the same with Live Alive on the train. I think a little less so, because that game as a 2D HD game has less of a quote unquote console feel to it, But that said, the story of that game and all the kind of end game stuff and the visuals and just, like going through those levels and grinding through the last dungeons, I was just like fully locked in, and it didn't feel like a 4-hour train journey. It just felt like I've just played my game for a while and whoops, now I'm back in London, and I think for me, that those types of I would say Astral Chain and Xenoblade are more the type of game that fulfills the promise of the Switch, but I would say every game kind of fulfills the promise of the Switch, and it depends. It kind of depends how much you're into it, right? Like if you're not that into the game, then I think it's more to do with the game itself than I think the system. But the Switch giving you the ability to melt time on travel like that is just a huge benefit. Honestly.
Yeah, I think there's obviously to some degree every game I agree kind of shows the promise of the Switch. I think HD2D is a good example where, sure, like the fundamentals of that do feel quite handheld, but you think back to some of the maybe like Pokemon or an RPG we would have played handheld traditionally, like something about HD2D is like, this is like glowing up something that is obviously so old, and I think to have the power to do that with like the Switch is incredibly cool. I think back to when the Switch launched and we were playing Breath of the Wild, and I was going to my cousin's wedding in New York. We also had some time in Florida, and I was spending months. I think I took like 3 to 4 months to beat everything in Breath of the Wild, and bringing Breath of the Wild on a plane and then playing in like, I even brought my dock and just like plugged it into the hotel room TV, and knowing. Not only is, I think, the Switch obviously an incredible handheld, but when you do want to play like docked into a TV, you just have to bring a dock and one extra cable. That's it. Like, you're already bringing the power pack because you want to charge the thing.
Yeah.
So you couldn't do that. You couldn't do it like a Series X or a PS5. That's
no.
true. But like even PS4 and Xbox One at the time, like, you're not really going to do that. You're not going to bring
unless
it
you're Greg Miller, and you pack it into your suitcase. Like, no, not many people do that.
Right. I mean, I have, like, back before the Switch, I would bring my Wii U back to Scotland from Brussels.
Yeah.
In my suitcase. But on holiday is slightly different, and I'd want to go lighter. So the Switch is perfect for that. And to be able to continue, like, 100-hour game and just keep it going seamlessly with a game like Breath of the Wild, not to mention the fact that like that game looks great and is full 3D action open world, like that's just not a handheld experience you just traditionally associate with being on a handheld. So like that was unbelievable, to be honest, and maybe it's been downhill from there because that game was just ridiculous. But
of course, yeah,
I do also associate Octopath Traveler with going on holiday in Spain back in 2018 and just being able to just hang out, chill, play that game on the plane, in the villa, like it, being able to just seamlessly do all of that and not have to think about it. Like I definitely always think now when I'm going away, like, okay, but what, I might be playing all this stuff on PS5 and Xbox Series X, but what am I going to be playing on Switch? Because that's the one I can actually seamlessly bring on holiday or a journey. Like, we were just down in the Peak District last week, and I just played like the Splatoon 3 single player. It was great. Like, and then I can come back home and play some online, like the same game, the same system. Like, it sounds obvious, but like I think it is still, the Switch is still fulfilling like that dream. Now we're 5, almost 6 years on from the launch. Like that magic hasn't died at all, and I think that they keep putting out great games. And those great, especially the Nintendo games, run incredibly well on the system, handheld and docked for the most part. And I think that it's definitely almost all Nintendo first party have really fulfilled like the promise of the Switch.
Yeah, totally. And I think also some other fun things with having like the Switch online features of the Nintendo the NES and the Super Nintendo, like those smaller games. I often find myself when I'm on the tube playing my Anbernic is like I'm trying to gravitate towards stuff where I don't worry too much if I miss the music or if I miss like those extra added elements. if I wanted to play Xenoblade, I would not be playing on a train because I want to be in that experience. I want to have headphones on. I want to be paying attention to it, which is why it works for longer journeys. But for like quick, brief spurts, if I was to play a Switch on the Underground, it would probably be like, yeah, I'm going to play some, I don't know, Banjo-Kazooie or something old that like I know the music and I don't have to worry that much about absorbing all the elements of it. And like, of course, I can do that at home if I want to. But if I'm just jumping in and playing, I don't know, some like random shmup that went on the Super Nintendo Online service, I don't really care too much about those extraneous elements, and so you can kind of have more kind of like chilled, tailored experiences to the kind of mode of travel that you're doing at that point in time, which is nice. It gives you a lot to kind of jump into, and it's also, I think, the benefit of those for shorter journeys is not only the Switch just being able to go into a sleep mode whenever you want and take up basically no battery. I remember the first day that I got the Switch and I was like, I'm just going to take it out the dock because I didn't want to, I was like afraid of overcharging and weird shit like that when I first got it. I was like, I'm just going to leave it in my drawer. I'm just going to like, it was at like 97% and I like turned it off, and I woke up the next morning and turned it on and it was like 95%. I was like, holy shit, this is magic. What? Like not even my phone does this. This is absolutely insane. Like the Switch retains battery in sleep mode like nothing else. It's really, really impressive. So being able to do that, but also for like the Switch Online games, is you can just save state whenever, which is really, really convenient, and helps for those shorter burst journeys if you are going to play it on those type of places. But because my Switch case is quite bulky, I do find it hard to just take on those kind of train journeys.
Oh, my Switch case has become even more bulky. I showed it when you were around MZ, but I've got the fixed dress one, and I've mentioned it before, but I would highly recommend that thing, honestly, if you like a Pro controller and if you've got big hands like me, not got these little hands like MZ, like you need big hands, and you got a lot more comfortable feeling that Pro controller. For those who don't know, it's basically a plastic thing that links the Pro controller to the Switch screen itself. And you can adjust it, and it does feel heavy, but it's
very heavy, better
in my view. But
yeah, it's very, very cool.
Second question from Alan says, this question is purely alternative reality speculation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. If the pandemic never happened, would the Switch be as successful, less successful, or even more successful? The Switch released in that perfect window of pre-pandemic and then benefited from Animal Crossing at the height of the pandemic and is now benefiting from the world opening up again. How might Nintendo's success or lack of success be different if the pandemic had never happened? And then Alan goes on to say, thanks for all the brilliant work, not just on the podcast, but also in the community you're building online. Great group of people discussing all things Nintendo and non-Tendo. Keep it up.
Thank you very much, Alan. Really appreciate that. And if you do want to jump in and join the community, we're on Discord, and you can check that out in the show notes as we mentioned at the start of the segment. This is tricky because I think like the factors that came together to give Nintendo a successful pandemic were mainly associated with Animal Crossing itself, right? Like, yeah. I think Animal Crossing was more successful because of the pandemic, and I think part of that is the idea of interactions with friends, right? Like the ability to the ability to almost go outside without going outside, like build your own community and world when you're kind of like trapped inside. The kind of like outdoorsiness of Animal Crossing, the kind of bug catching and
it shuts you out from the world that's going on and just creates this very rose tinted, nice, happy place that you can then experience with friends. It's like the perfect escapism for the time.
Right, exactly.
Which is why the first game I played after Animal Crossing was Last of Us Part 2.
Had to just go back to the depressing stuff, But I do think that it might not have been as successful had we just gone on regular life, right? Like, I think that the Switch was always building momentum, was always doing well, but I think that just like weird circumstance really rocketed it. But also gaming generally as a industry was one of the only ones that was trending upwards in a time where every other industry was trending down. And it's because people just were at home and had nothing to do, and so they needed something to put hours into. Like a lot of people, I'm sure, not like us who have like a million things we want to be doing all the time and shows and games and stuff that we want to care about, but more people are just like, regular people who are just like, I don't know, I've watched all of Netflix, what do I do now? And so I think games became a bit of a community thing for people to hang out online and play with friends, but also just a thing to put time into when they just didn't know what else to do, and felt, I guess, the lack of control that people felt in their lives as a result of COVID. Video games are unique in that they give you a sense of control, right? Like I think that's one of the things why people gravitate towards them on like a deeper psychological level, is that I think we play games because we feel like it's something we actually have a sense of control over in our lives, right? And I think that kind of resonates with a lot of people during that period of time. And so, not only did Nintendo doing well, but also Microsoft and Sony with the other consoles. And I do think that the handheld nature obviously suffered during that period, but I also think a lot of people were probably, they have this small space to be in their house or whatever, or if it's a small apartment. Like, I do think the flexibility of Switch helped even in those scenarios where you're not just sitting on your TV. If you want to, you can take it to bed with you, or you can hang out on the couch, or you can, be at dinner playing it or something, like there is a flexibility to the Switch that also gives you a bit more variety in like not just being in one place one time doing one thing,
I think Nintendo also had the huge advantage, aside from Animal Crossing, that they were midlife with the Switch. Yes. And they weren't worrying about a console launch like two other very big companies in the video game industry.
Yeah.
I think this has two advantages. A, they don't have to worry about all like those chip shortages and pricing in the same way that those other launches had to worry about. But secondly, like the Switch could like come down in price and like doesn't have to be day one price, right? Mm-hmm. Like, didn't the Switch come down a little bit in price before the pandemic? And
I think it was basically the Switch Lite happened, right? So you also have an additional type of device that's even cheaper if you want to just have a handheld thing, right? So,
and I would attribute a lot of Nintendo's success to those iterations of the Switch, and a lot of their successes come honestly because they haven't launched a Switch 2. And that's really annoying to say because we would love a little bit more juice in that Switch. But I think they've had a lot of success because they kept on doing what they're doing. And yes, they got quite lucky with the timing of Animal Crossing. But I think they had a fundamental strong base going into the pandemic. And, now we're out of the pandemic and then we're entering like a recession in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about video games is they've become a very resilient industry because video games compared to most hobbies, it's all variable depending on the person, but as a whole, it's quite an affordable hobby in comparison to many things, especially when you compare it to the price of going out for food and drinks constantly, which is what people definitely do a lot less of in the pandemic, but also do a lot less of in a recession.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you can have more nights at home where you're enjoying a video game, that works out so much cheaper in the long run that it's a very appealing thing to do when there's a recession on. So I think Nintendo have, versus their competition, really nailed it in terms of timing. A lot of this is through luck, obviously, through the timing of their systems, but also, they've got some really strong games that they keep putting it out. And
I think ultimately, because the pandemic was it affected the entire fucking world, right? But like Nintendo have games that appeal to broader, wider audiences, right? Animal Crossing is a game that appeals to people who don't usually play video games. And I think that is also part of the reason Switch succeeds in these times, is that the types of games that they make have such a broad, wide appeal across age groups, gender, everything.
They're the Marvel and Star Wars of video games, They appeal to everyone. They're not just one specific area.
Yeah, totally. Which I think makes a big difference.
Very valuable. So, had the pandemic not happened, I think Nintendo would be doing great. But I tell you what, I think Xbox and PlayStation would be doing quite a bit better, to be honest, because I think they've really struggled with timing and marketing and
chip shortages mainly is the big thing for everybody, but them in particular has been a nightmare. And so I do think that this assessment from Alan is correct, that like they almost had the perfect storm of like they had a console that was successful, then they had a global event that made it even more successful, and now the console just continues to sell because more people have it as a result of that, and you have more games coming out, and it's just like a self-perpetuating cycle basically that's kind of built.
And you talk about games that aim to a wide audience, like Last of Us Part 2 is a great game, but there's definitely people who wouldn't have wanted to play an apocalyptic game at that point in time.
Oh, definitely,
but would still respect that game and think it's a great game, but might have been like, I'm going to not play that just
I'm going to
now,
pass on that, yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And I think the nature of the games they're doing and appealing to that wide audience, like, it's really valuable.
For sure. So,
Right. Our next email is from Renee from Germany. It says, "Hey MBZ and Bally, I like to have a decent overview of where my email contact information is. So occasionally I try a bit of housekeeping in identifying who knows me and getting rid of accounts I no longer need. There was a Bethesda account I made because a friend talked me into trying out Fallout 76. Yeah, that went well. A Paradox account and an Ubisoft account that I don't even remember creating, and a PSN account I don't need because I don't have a PlayStation. So there were many candidates to get rid of, and I realized just how weird this whole endeavor is. Ubisoft and Paradox were okay, allowing me to delete them myself by logging in and searching a bit for the right option. Bethesda required me to chat with someone from their tech support. God, I hate stuff like that. PSN, on the other hand, is a huge pain because if your account is German like mine, the only option is to call Sony support, which is either not available or has like 30-minute queues. Yeah, no thanks. Guess this one will be in Sony's database forever. I don't know how it would work for Nintendo accounts, but considering their, let's call it, proficiency with these kinds of things, I can't imagine it being pleasant. Working in tech myself, I know that deleting user accounts is quite often not intended, but if you still need to offer that option, if nothing else because of legal things, making it harder for customers may be understandable, but is definitely bad practice in my book. I guess with the trend of big companies buying each other, looking at you, Microsoft, many of their systems will eventually merge together, reducing the mess we see now. But that obviously opens up a lot of other problems. What are your thoughts on this? Do you know every account you have? Are you hesitant to make a new one just for one game, or do you not worry about it? Lastly, do you think these integrations of bonus online features into offline games are getting out of hand? Renee.
Lovely. Well, yeah, it's one of those things that I think you just kind of happen upon, especially with me with PC, right? Like talking about all these launches, Bethesda and Ubisoft and all these places. Yeah, like my data and my stuff is like in a bunch of places, and I technically still own stuff on those accounts, right? So like my Uplay account has a bunch of games that I can only play by accessing that. Same with Origin. I think it's now called something else. The EA desktop app is something else. I have a Bethesda account. I'm pretty sure I have. I've got a Battle.net account as well. I have an Epic account. Like when you're on PC in particular, look, you got a lot of fucking accounts for a lot of different companies for reasons that you don't really understand, and you just kind of you end up with them. I think I actually have a Warner Brothers account now because to play multiverses, they make you sign up for a Warner Brothers specific account. And I think this happens less on console, though it still is a bit prevalent, because I know it's happened, I think, a couple of times with you, Bally, where it pops up and is like, you have to create this specific account. Like, you created an Epic account for stuff like Rocket League and Fall Guys, right?
Yeah.
So, like, they still kind of get you, even if you're on console, which is
quite a new phenomenon. I say new, maybe like last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
But it definitely wasn't something, it was like a PC only thing for a while, it felt like.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel about it? Because it's not something I really think about that much of, like, I guess just because we're on the internet and all companies know everything we're doing and data is just like this currency that just kind of exists, like, I appreciate like the hoops that Renee's jumping through to get rid of these accounts, but like, I don't know, I think they make it this difficult because a lot of people will start to do it and realize how annoying it is and then just give up, right? Like, that's kind of how they build this stuff. It's same with subscription services. Trying to unsubscribe from something, like the other day I subbed to a Twitch channel real quick just to see something, and then I wanted to unsub so I wouldn't get recharged for it. And just like trying to find where the fuck in my account to go to like unsubscribe from this thing, they just make it the hardest thing possible versus signing up for the thing, which they make the easiest thing possible, right?
Yeah. It's one of the things where ultimately, I'd look at it two ways. One, what information do they actually have? So normally they'll have my name and my email address.
And a password that you give them, right?
And a password that you give them. And this is an argument, I guess, in favor of like, you need to change your password for every single thing you use because we're robots and can remember 8,000 passwords.
Of course.
But yeah, and I guess you could set that password up with an authenticator, I guess. Would that be possible?
I think so. I mean, I use Google Authenticator for pretty much everything. I have
that's very impressive you do that. I'm definitely not good for doing that and need to do that.
A dual factor is like necessary in this day and age, I find. Like it's going to protect you with everything, and it's just good to set it up on every account possible.
So really. I think that sounds honestly like the best way of protecting yourself, and knowing the full downsides of having your name and email address out there, I don't really know enough about. And I think it's fair enough to say, if you don't know enough about it, maybe you should be more cautious. But also, how do you get by in this world without an email address to enter into every damn form you have to, fill out for everything? So on the one hand, they've not got like my personal address, my phone number, these things, and that's where websites like Twitter do my head in, where they're like, you should really lock down your account, and in order to do that we need your phone number. And I'm like, no, Twitter, I don't want to give you my phone number. Like, this is ridiculous. And I can see what they're trying to do and lock it down, but ultimately I think if you compare it to something like phone companies, where I think regulators have, in the last 10 years or so, have become a lot better about regulating phone companies and making it much more, they have to be a lot more transparent about when your contract ends, how much you're paying them, how to unsubscribe. And by and large, you can now like unsubscribe from all phone companies through either chat boxes or emails or like online forms. You don't actually have to pick up the phone on someone. You definitely did before. And I think this is a good example of just regulators being behind an industry that is, at the cutting edge of technology ultimately.
Right.
And I know regulators aren't always a great solution to everything, but this is a very good example where I do think that the EU and other regulators can just come in and say, you now need to be very clear about how to unsubscribe. It's now illegal that has to be a phone call. It should be an online form. And you need a big, you get emails where there's a big unsubscribe button at the bottom right. Like, there should be an equivalent of that for these accounts and video games. And it should be simple. But ultimately, you need regulators to be far more engaged about these things. And the kinds of groups that will lobby governments about these things aren't obviously the video game companies. They're going to be like information human rights groups kinds of things. The groups that are, I can't think of these groups, but liberal groups who are very interested in government not holding on to information, kind of pressure groups and things. And ultimately those groups need funding and money to have the time to lobby governments and educate governments, because ultimately, like, having worked in Brussels, like, these groups have a lot of sway over politicians. When a politician agrees with the argument of a group, the group can help write legislation often. Like, they can help, they can go so far in writing and actually making legislation that can get their point across and change the law for the whole of, like, the EU in this case. That makes really substantial difference, because ultimately the consumer does need their information protected, and it should be easy to unsubscribe from these things. And I think we're just playing a bit of chicken and egg at the moment, and it's the companies and the publishers that have all the power at the moment, and it's going to take time before regulators do catch up. But I do think in the next 5 to 10 years there will be a big crackdown on this, and there will also be more. There will be more subscription options where you can have them all under one roof, and then by being under one roof, you will have the ability to unsub and sub to what you choose at any one time, almost like multiple subscriptions. I think that's going to happen to lots of subscription services anyway, but there's going to be a market for having all these things under one roof, and you can, like a tick box menu, you can say what you want and don't want at any given time.
Yeah. I know that you had a bit of a run-in with Nintendo for an account thing that wasn't about getting rid of an account, but was about figuring out, like, there's money on this account and how do I change it. Basically, we were basically doing region hopping, which is like changing your region on your Nintendo account so that you can buy something from a different store. I now have it set up, so I have multiple different accounts. I've got a Japan one, I've got a US one, and I've got my regular one, which I would advise people do because of what Bally went through with his account and switching it over to US. So do you want to explain what happened there, Bally?
Yeah, so basically a listener gifted me a game. The gift was like a code for like the US shop, I guess. So I thought, Nintendo do region switching. I'll switch my main account to US. So that worked seamlessly. I then downloaded. Did I use the code?
I think you used the code to add credit to the account.
I used the code, got the credit. I think the credit was like $20 or something, and the game might have been like $19.99. I think it was Okami actually. So I had like a cent left, and then I wanted to switch my US account with a cent back to Great British pounds. And Nintendo were like, no, you have to zero the account to like have to be able to switch back. I'm like, right, this is a cent. Like, what? Why does an account have to be zeroed to switch it? Like, I don't really understand the law behind that. And then what did I do? I think I went to like a Nintendo. Did I get into a chat room or something?
Yeah.
I think I did online. Yeah, I got into a chat room. And then they were pretty helpful. Like, yeah, we can zero that account. And then as the conversation was ending, they basically said something along the lines of like, please make sure not to do this again in the future or something. And it's like, what do you mean? Why am I getting like a slap on the wrist for this? Like, how am I breaking the rules in any way whatsoever? You know, like, this is your system. You should support it. And that's one thing I do have an issue with the Nintendo account system is like, they're neither, yes, you can region switch, but it's not something they shout about and promote.
No,
but it's just something you can do. So I don't understand. It's very strange because Nintendo normally shout about everything they do and don't mention a word on the things they don't do. Whereas this is something that kind of comes in that grey space in the middle, which is very strange. So
yeah, I think a lot of it is also because internationally prices vary on a scale. You know, I bought my copy of Skyrim from the Russian eShop back in the day because it was way cheaper. You know, like, people find ways to get around pricing. This happens on Steam a lot. If you want to get cheap games on Steam, you go to the Brazilian version of Steam and you buy games extremely cheap, right? Like, that's kind of the way that people who want to get games for super cheap prices, they kind of use the VPNs to get around those systems, basically. And I think that's kind of the gray area part of it that, you know, no company really wants to discuss openly, even if Nintendo give you the ability to do so. You know?
And I think that maybe other companies like Sony and Xbox would still have issues with you having money on accounts and then switching, because, for example, I played Ori and the Will of the Wisps early by switching to a New Zealand account because that game comes out earlier.
I did the same thing with Jedi Fallen Order. I used a VPN to trick into thinking I was in New Zealand as well, so I could start playing it early, basically.
Now, Xbox, it was fine, I'm assuming, because it was on Game Pass and there was no transactional money sitting in an account.
Right.
Maybe they would have also kicked up a fuss had I played Ori Will of the Wisps, having paid, I don't know, 10 quid, 12 quid for it, and then had a penny left and then swapped back after having New Zealand dollars or something. But I don't know. I just don't know. But it was very clunky for Nintendo and frustrating, and it's all, like I was saying about regulators, the problem at the moment, like, regulators aren't just to make this, you know, it's to prevent there from being a Wild West, which is basically what there currently is. Yes, there are current laws about transactions and things like that, but these companies can do it in the way they want to, like that Nintendo example I just gave. Like, that can be like a totally a Nintendo decision, just be like, nope, you can't have money on accounts when you switch between them, this sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know, it's messy, and I think regulators can clean it up a lot.
Definitely. I think the last thing that Renee was talking about was integrations of bonus online features in offline games. I cut a little bit of the email down because it had a lot more kind of examples of that stuff. But I came across this. I'm coming across this now with Splatoon 3 of like, you know, I want to access the shop and stuff and the weapons, and the game's like, no, you got to be connected online if you want to access the shops. I'm like, what the this is really weird. Like, I should be able to do this offline, but it requires me to be online to do this part of it that seemingly shouldn't be, right? And you know, that's happened, I think, a lot more on the other consoles usually. The example he gave was Watch Dogs Legion, where you basically had to be connected online even though it's a very valid offline game. It's almost like the thing that Microsoft were talking about with the Xbox One originally was like, we're going to be an always online platform, and you have to check in and you have to make sure your internet checks regularly to make sure you're still online, even in single player games and stuff like that. And I think it's something that people have accepted a bit more, but mostly for just like multiplayer online games that are always online. And I don't know, it's weird to me. It is very weird because, like, Destiny, for example, you play the Destiny campaign solo. You don't need anyone else, but they kind of force you to be online in order to access that game at any point in time, and it's just a bit weird. And I don't know, it's probably becoming less of an issue as online connectivity and everything is just universal and everywhere. But I don't know how I feel about it. Like it feels like from a standpoint of like keeping these things around, of like preservation, in however many years' time, how are you going to be able to access these things if companies have demanded, these single player things? You need to have online connectivity. It's a bit messed up, I think.
Yeah, it's all a mess is the conclusion.
Yeah, pretty much.
But thank you very much for your email, Renee, and that's all we got time for emails on this segment. But as I said at the top of the segment, please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We are always in need of more, and we really appreciate it when you send them in. That's what we've got time for in this segment. Let's go to the third segment, where we're going to be talking about our top games of the year from 2014. We will be right back.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the third and finale part of today's show. It's time for a bit of navel gazing. Navel gazing, right? That's the phrase.
You can gaze at noses if you really want.
Yeah, I like nasal gazing always. In Splatoon 3, there's a giant Moai statue with some big noses. I was looking at those, so we can do a bit of both.
The Moai statue just appears a lot in video games, doesn't it? I think the Japanese have like a fascination with them.
Yeah, I think so. They isn't there one in Konami Crazy Races you can play as well or something? Yep. Yeah, people love them. I don't know why, but anyway, they exist. But anyway, we're gonna take a look back in time, and I thought it'd be good to go over some previous Game of the Year years in our history, and maybe just recount them and basically have a bit of a look back at that year in particular, what was going on, what we were playing, and reassess, basically look at our list and think, has our opinion changed over time? What has kind of solidified as like our favorite things and our things that we may have dropped in our estimation? How have things evolved in our taste? And also, have we played things that came out that year since then that we would slot back in? Basically just take a little bit of a look at the past. So, Barney, do you want to explain what we did back in Game of the Year in 2014?
Yeah, so our format back then, so this is the first full year of the podcast. We started in 2013, but 2014 we played a full year of Nintendo video games, and we did individual lists back then. So rather than do the joint thing we do now with our big top 10, we did individual lists, and that was all games that came out on Nintendo systems for that year. So do you want to jump to your top 5 first?
Sure. So my top 5 in order was at number 5, Mario Kart 8. At number 4, Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright. Number 3 was Shovel Knight. Number 2 was Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. And number 1 was Bayonetta 2.
Isn't it wild how long ago Shovel Knight came out?
Yeah, and it's they only just finished it, like 2 years ago or something? Yeah, and a sequel still in development, not out yet, meaning the whole of it, but yeah, man. Yeah.
So my top 5 was number 5, Smash Brothers for 3DS. Number 4, Mario Kart 8. Number 3, Shovel Knight. Number 2, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And number 1 was Smash Brothers for Wii U.
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't do like a joint top 5 this
No.
year. This was just kind of like individual lists, and I think we probably could have done one, if I'm honest, because we had a lot of crossover basically.
Yeah.
A lot of similar things that we had played. But is there anything, Valley, that stands out to you immediately as like, I would change this, this would be a thing that I would swap around or anything?
Well, I should say I do intend on playing Bayonetta 2 this year because I have to. It was our little game trade thing we did. So I'm frustrated that I don't have an opinion on that game yet because that might insert its way into this top 5 potentially. I don't know.
Yeah,
but looking at my top 5, I'm pretty I probably would go with that same order, to be honest.
Interesting, because I thought you might put Tropical Freeze as number 1 instead and trade that for Smash Wii U.
On a given day, probably. Yes, I agree. It's tight. I'll give you that. I think I could go with one or the other. And maybe Smash Ultimate has surpassed Smash for Wii U in my mind a bit, although as much as we love the trophies from Smash for Wii U, so yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe Tropical Freeze would be. I look back so ridiculously fondly on Tropical Freeze. That yeah, you're probably right. It might take number 1. I think Shovel Knight sitting at 3. I think is good. I think Mario Kart 8, having jumped back into all the DLC, which I always, does DLC count? Does it strengthen the game from that long ago? Like this is 2014 we're talking about, and now we're playing DLC.
Yeah, this is like the Mario Kart 8 of the Wii U era, which had at this point in time wouldn't have had like the extra DLC that they added onto that game.
Not in 2014. Did that come in 15 or 16?
I think it came the year after. Yeah, so it would have just been the base game of Mario Kart 8,
which was still really strong. Like those are some fantastic tracks. Obviously not enough modes, but that it's still a really strong game. And I don't think I beat a ton of games that came out that year on Nintendo systems. So I think Smash Brothers for 3DS was almost just like to make up the numbers a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Like, you basically didn't have another option, so it was like, well, I also played Smash on 3DS, which, by the way, look, Smash on 3DS, a fantastic version of that game, and I would legitimately say, like, a different version. Like, the feel is the same. Yeah, but
I'd be interested how it looks and feels. I think it felt great. I'd be interested in how it looks today, because I remember the demo for that game so much more than the actual game, where we were just like playing with Villager and Mega Man, and they're like, hey, these new characters were playing Smash on 3DS online. This is insane. And then when the game came out, there was like a window where we played a ton of that game. And then it was like a month later, 2 months later, it just came out on Wii U, and we were like, right, here we go. And then I think I didn't personally do a ton of going back to Smash for 3DS after the main game came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd have this list as it is, but maybe swap Tropical Freeze to number 1, you're right, because that just is a lot more fond in my memory, perhaps. But I think Shovel Knight deserves to be 3, Mario Kart 4, and then Smash 3DS at 5.
Okay. For me, see, here's the thing, right? Because, like, Bayonetta 2 was the big Smash surprise out of nowhere. Like, I didn't expect to play it. I didn't expect to really enjoy it. And then it just kind of, like, blew me away with the spectacle and all the music and all that stuff.
It was like the surprise of the year, and you felt really amazing about it in the moment. So
yeah,
maybe that's why it's higher. But
yeah, I think so. Whereas I think probably I look back more fondly at my time with Smash Wii U, just the amount of time I put into it, like all the stuff that is in it, the new characters that they added. The single player I still think is kind of bad for both 3DS and Wii U. I think it was just like, I think the Wii U, did the Wii U have the board game? I think it had the board game in it, didn't it?
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, it was not very good. So I think I might actually put Smash Wii U at number 1 and have Bayonetta at number 2. And I think had I taken more time to go back and like replay Bayonetta, that might change, but you know, it's been such a long time now that it's hard to kind of put in my memory. And I also I kind of just played through Bayonetta. It was the first real character action game that I'd gone into, so I played it on easy, and I didn't go back and kind of do what you're supposed to do with these types of games, which is to replay them on different difficulties and to use all the different weapons, because obviously being a Nintendo published game, they had a bunch of stupid shit like the Chain Chomp in there and like other like weird like Bowser things, and you know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of that in the third game as well. But yeah, I feel feel like I owe Bayonetta 2 to go back and replay it almost. So I don't know if I'm going to have the time to do that before the third game comes out, because we've only got about a month left before Bayonetta 3 hits our shores. But yeah,
I want to try and beat Bayonetta 2 before then to see if I want to be day one Bayo 3 or not.
Yeah, I don't know if that would just burn you out though, right? Playing it and then going straight into another one.
It might have left it a little late. That's my fault.
Which I think happened with Fire Emblem a little bit, because you were like burning through Conquest before Three Houses came out, and I think that also might have affected your enjoyment of that game. God, so it's definitely a risk that can be taken. But I think I would probably switch Smash with Bayonetta and put Bayonetta 2. I think Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright is a fucking fantastic game, and I actually personally would put it over Shovel Knight. I think Shovel Knight is really, really fantastic, and I think its impact at the time was more strongly felt. But I think over the years, with more and more side-scrolling platformers being made, and you know, my taste being evolved and that sort of stuff, I think the original game is still fantastic. But there are still like moments of NES design in there. Like I think of the level where it's all dark and there's lightning, and you're having to almost navigate it like blind. And you know, some of stuff like that I think is still quite
the music. My
tricky.
God, the music's
really good. Yeah, but you know, I love Phoenix Wright, and I think Professor Layton's also a really good series. But this combination, bringing them together, first of all, it just looks gorgeous on 3DS, like Capcom getting the most out of that system possible. But it just like the combining of these worlds and like improving the elements of Phoenix Wright that I felt were the weakest, which is, you know, the days where you're collecting evidence, you're going around and talking to people. By replacing those segments with Professor Layton segments, where you're basically just doing what Professor Layton gameplay is.
That's really cool. You've got a hard copy of this game, right?
I do, yes.
I might have to borrow that from you.
Yes.
Yeah, this sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. So like the Professor Layton stuff, and it might be a good idea, Bally, to just play the first Professor Layton first. So you'll have played the first Phoenix Wright, the first Professor Layton.
Have you got a hard copy of that?
I don't know. I was Dirty Little Pirate Boy and Ace carded that back in the day. So yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Had Shovel Knight not had its umpteen new modes and expansions, would it be a little more rose tinted than your mind? Have we reached the point with Shovel Knight where we're like, all those expansions are really great and I've had a great time with each one, but it's like, it's a lot. It's
almost exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit exhausting. As high quality as they are, I think the very first expansion or new campaign with Plague Knight, I feel like I was the hottest on out of all the expansions, and then from there it's been like, yeah, this is cool, but it's you know, it's more, not more of the same because it's a different character, but it felt samey.
You're basically playing through the same levels, they're just adapted, right?
Adapted, yeah.
There's almost a familiarity I have with Shovel Knight that makes it so, yeah, I haven't had enough space from it, you know? Whereas with stuff like Bayonetta or Phoenix Wright versus Professor Layton, they've been in my kind of rose-tinted nostalgia.
It's like one thing that just gets preserved and more rose-tinted over time, arguably.
Which is also with Mario Kart, because it's so present in our minds now. It's almost like, yeah, this game is still it's like GTA 5, isn't it? It just like never dies. It's just a current, almost modern game.
Yeah, it is Nintendo's GTA 5 for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we'll get leaks on Mario Kart 9.
Oh God.
But, yeah. So yeah, I think it's interesting, my feelings on Shovel Knight, and like, as like indie 2D platformer, it has been far surpassed so much by Celeste in my mind that it's very much like Shovel Knight is great, it's good, but like there's better games in the kind of the indie 2D platform space. It's a very different style of platform, and maybe it's unfair to compare so closely, but it's, I don't know, Shovel Knight.
It's like the epitome of indie game. Like it's like the first beacon that I think we talked about a lot, and was like the kind of almost iconic Nintendo indie game.
Yeah, it's a big deal for our podcast for sure, and the amount we talked about, the amount of hype, and you know, I think we're both really looking forward to Mina the Hollower. Mina the Hollower, that's the name to remember. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, but I think Shovel Knight it's great that they're finally working on a new game. I think I would feel better about Shovel Knight had it not had all the expansions, personally.
Yeah, potentially.
But that was, we were very excited for the expansions at the time, but with hindsight now, it's like, yeah, I don't know, just sometimes when a game just comes out, does a really great thing, and then goes away, it makes you feel stronger about that game.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I personally feel a lot more strongly about Smash Brothers Wii U and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze than I do about these other 3 games on my list.
Yeah.
As much as I think Shovel Knight's maybe better than the other 2, but yeah. I've got a $1 million question, MBZ.
Okay, yeah.
Now that you've played Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze...
Oh, shit, okay, yeah.
How do you feel about it on your list?
Oh, man.
If it made it at all.
Yeah, so I was actually there's another game that I played after this year that I don't think came out on Nintendo platforms in 2014. Maybe I played it. So Ollie Ollie is the game I was thinking of like, well, if I was to put another game on this list to knock Mario Kart 8 off the bottom, it would probably be Ollie Ollie, and I'd probably put Ollie Ollie either at number 5 or like a little bit higher than that, because I fucking love that game. I think it was so good. I do think Ollie Ollie World has surpassed both of those previous games, but yeah, I think that would have been probably number 5. And if I was to swap later, I'd probably swap Layton and Shovel Knight. But Tropical Freeze, man, I would probably put it above Shovel Knight. You know, like I think that game is utterly fantastic. Like, it is the best modern platformer that Nintendo have made. It
was like the number 1 game Bally moaned about on the show. You got to play. Like, okay.
And I didn't understand. I hadn't seen the light, you know, because I'd played Returns. I'd played Returns on 3DS, and I was like, yeah, this is a really good, well-made, solid platformer. You know, I enjoyed it a lot, and I thought it was hard and challenging, but like it was solid. And I was like, yeah, Tropical Freeze just seems like it's more of that, but it's like it just goes so far beyond that it really elevates it, I think, in a way. So I would say probably I would knock Shovel Knight back a slot, and then maybe I just knock Shovel Knight off and have Ollie Ollie at number 5, and then Tropical Freeze at number 4, and Professor Layton versus Phoenix. I still probably personally would take Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright over Tropical Freeze, just my personal taste. Right. But yeah, I would definitely have it. I think I would have it in the top 5. It'd probably have to squeeze in there.
Because Tropical Freeze is a good example of like high budget first party 2D platformer that hasn't been surpassed in my view, and like that's 8 years ago at this point. Like and when you think about Nintendo, they've put out a lot of 2D platformers in that time, to be honest. I mean, a lot of them are Kirby and Yoshi,
of course, yes. Which almost like dilutes it down, doesn't it? Right? Yeah. Like it's just like, here's another one of these.
And obviously like Mario Maker's maybe a slightly different thing, but yeah, I think Tropical Freeze is still just like the pinnacle of like what you can do with music and level design that, like, you know, that incorporates aspects of the level into the mechanics of how you get through that level, whether it's a falling leaf on like an autumnal level or something, and just that is just a bopping experience. In fact, I need to replay that game on Switch because I have it on Switch.
Yeah, you have it, don't you? Get really on that funky mode, you know?
I do not want to play funky mode. I'm going vanilla. Thank you very much.
Of course, classic. Of course you do that. If we were to make a joint top list for 2014,
that's fun.
What do you think it would be? What do you think we would have? Let's say I had played Tropical Freeze back then. How do you think we would have ranked it? Do you think we would have put Smash at number 1?
I think because, regardless of how much we talk around all these games, and I think this has happened a few times in our top 50 games of all time lists, when we really break down like the highs of the highs when it comes to multiplayer online or even local multiplayer with like Smash Brothers on Wii U and Ultimate. Yeah. It's like some of the most incredible like moments we've had in gaming, and it's not just it's a great fighter. This is like a great fighter that we're having with some of our favorite like Nintendo characters.
There's also so much history to it. Like it's like over the years and years of like playing against each other, there's like matchups that like are infamous, and you know there's like almost a meme quality to it. Like totally. as soon as you pick Yoshi, you know I'm gonna fucking groan about it. You know, like it's just there's like a history and a weight to it that I think is fun.
And as much as we've grown up and played all the Mario Karts together, it's not the same. There's not the same competition because obviously I was a bit better at Mario Kart.
Just say you know MBZ is shit at Mario Kart and there's not a competition. All right, let's just get the truth out there.
But even as our skills with Mario Kart have become slightly more aligned, it's still not the same cut and thrust of Smash Brothers because it's a fighter, it's not versus a racer, and it's all Nintendo characters. It's not just a smattering of Nintendo characters, and you know there's something special about Smash Brothers. As much as the single player is pretty rubbish most of the time, and as much as we go for like really long periods between drinks, as it were, between having a great online sesh or a local sesh, but like even when you were around just the other week, and we got in a few matches, it was like, this is still just so damn good. And
I love it. Yeah.
Obviously that was Smash Ultimate, but this Smash 4 is still the bones of Ultimate, and I think
Ultimate was basically 4.5 in a way.
Well, exactly. So I would vouch for it massively to be number one. And then I guess we'd get in a big tussle to get like, because I've not played Bayonetta 2, we'd probably side with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze at 2.
Yeah, I think Tropical Freeze would probably end up at number 2. Yeah, I think so.
And then I would let you slide Bayonetta above Shovel Knight if you felt strongly about it, to be honest.
I think so.
I think Shovel Knight would slide to 4. And then 5...
Probably Mario Kart through force of your will alone.
I mean, 5... Mario Kart would be a nice joint game to put at 5, but I appreciate you really like Layton, so I wouldn't mind Mario Kart slipping if you really wanted Layton.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I think our list... I've just made this up myself.
Sure, yeah.
I think our list would be Smash Brothers, then Tropical Freeze, then Bayonetta, then...
Shovel Knight,
then Layton?
Yeah, I think so. That makes sense. Yeah. Also, I think at the time I was much more down on Mario Kart 8. I was like, you know what? Maybe the DLC did come out in 2014.
The DLC was fantastic. That first batch of DLC was off the chain. Like the F-Zero music and levels, and they had the Excite Bike and Animal Crossing. Like it was. And it was much later they introduced 200cc, so maybe it was still hot on it before they included 200.
Yeah, so it makes me think that the DLC was in 2014, because I don't know that I would have put Mario Kart 8 at number 5 otherwise. I might have found an excuse to put Smash for 3DS on there instead, because I certainly could have done that.
I'm convinced it did come out a year later, but I see what you're saying. Because that DLC is it the best DLC Nintendo's ever done? Like,
I don't know. I think the Smash character DLC is pretty outstanding. So
that's pretty good. I also enjoyed the Breath of the Wild DLC, so maybe God, yeah.
Torn of the Golden Country is the best DLC Nintendo's ever done. It's basically a whole 20-hour JRPG.
Okay.
So yeah, that's in fact the best. But yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have a list of the number of games I beat in 2014 either, because Backloggery thinks I beat 3.
Oh.
That was the year I started.
Yeah. Well, if you want to, we can go through my my basically all games.
Yeah, your cross-platform top 10. Let's hear that.
Yeah, so my number 10 was A Bird Story, which was a... It's like so it's part of the To the Moon series.
To make it clear, this was games you played in 2014.
Yes,
played games
exactly.
Since,
So this was a part of the To the Moon series. It was kind of like a short game in between the first and the second. So Finding Paradise was the second game in that series, but A Bird Story was like an interquel. Basically, it was like a brief, short, like 1 hour game that took place in between the first game and the second game. Basically, it was almost like a setup for the second game narratively. But yeah, it was the first thing I'd played from Kangao since playing To the Moon, so it definitely hit me pretty hard, and really enjoyed that. Number 9 was Hearthstone. I did not expect to play Hearthstone at all, and then I got into it through playing on iPad, and I started playing it on PC as well, and I was like, holy shit, this game is, like, it really got me into it, and I haven't really gone back to Hearthstone since, and I don't know what the community is like and how things were, but Hearthstone's a fantastic fucking game that is a good example of me being outside my comfort zone, right? Like, I think this year in particular, there were a couple of games that really shook me out of my comfort zone, and Hearthstone was one of those. And yeah, I played a lot more of it than I ever really expected to. Number 8 was The Wolf Among Us, which I think is still one of Telltale's best games, based on the Fables comic series, which is basically about, like, storybook characters in a kind of modern New York. So like Snow White and the Big Bad Wolf and all those kind of characters living in a modern New York. That's what the comic series is based on. But the Telltale game is really good. Like, it's fantastic, and they're actually bringing it back again. I think there's going to be a second season. So that's pretty awesome. Number 7 was Mario Kart 8. Number 6 was Layton vs. Wright. And number 5 was Titanfall, which was like the first-person shooter that really broke through for me. That was like, holy shit, I absolutely love this. That game was so fucking good, and I probably would put it higher, actually, on this list, looking in context of everything else. it probably would go above Shovel Knight, because I actually had Shovel Knight at number 3 on this list, and just below Shovel Knight was Rogue Legacy, which I probably would put above Shovel Knight as well. So Shovel Knight, I'm just getting shit on today, I guess. But Titanfall, and number 4 was Rogue Legacy, number 3 Shovel Knight, and then my number 1 and 2 are the same as what I had on my Nintendo list, which is Smash and Bayonetta. So yeah, there was some Nintendo breaking through there, but I don't think it fully broke through to the top echelons. But yeah.
You were still... I know your Nintendo journey started a lot earlier than mine, but you were still in that phase of like discovery and...
Yes.
Maybe... Could I go as far as saying a lot of the Nintendo games weren't breaking into the top echelon for you back then, or...
Yeah, probably.
Maybe just not that year.
Not that year, and I don't know. I think, if I'm honest, if you look at my top games over the last decade... Usually it's either an indie game or a Nintendo game that's number 1. I don't think I've actually had a non-Nintendo or non-indie game as number 1.
Okay.
There might be one example, but it will be a very rare example.
I don't think I have. Maybe It Takes Two counts, but that's now Nintendo, I guess. But
yeah, technically,
I've had a lot. Number 2. I should also say my cross-platform didn't start until 2018. But
yeah, was there anything in 2014 that came out during that year that you have played since that you would add? So Ollie Ollie would be one for me, and obviously Tropical Freeze would be one that I would add in.
I didn't love the first Ollie Ollie. Looking at games that came out, Last of Us Remastered, that doesn't really count. But
yeah.
Do you mean exactly. Nintendo or everything?
I mean, yeah, everything basically.
Let's call Last of Us 2013 because 2014 that's remastered.
Technically, you did play remastered, but you know.
Yeah, that's true. I've not played Sunset Overdrive yet. I really want to play that.
Oh shit, that absolutely. I think that would probably break into my top 10. I would say Sunset Overdrive might even be top 5. Like I fucking loved Sunset Overdrive. Holy shit! But it's like it leans into everything that I like about games. It's like movement and just like. It's just the bright colorfulness of it, you know, like it has like a lot of personality, and you know the writing's okay, it's like a bit dumb, but I think like just the feel of that game is absolutely top notch, and probably alongside Titanfall 2, like you can see what I like in those types of games of like Titanfall and Sunset Overdrive being some of my favorites is like all movement.
I've got 2 big ones for you actually.
Okay.
Wolfenstein: The New Order.
Yeah, so I personally, this follow-up game, Wolfenstein 2, the New Colossus, is the one I would side with. I think that's like the one that is tremendous.
Okay. You didn't play that back in 2014, did you?
The New Order. No, I didn't. I basically played the New Order right before the New Colossus came out, so I played them both in the same year. Okay. And New Order is really good. I definitely recommend playing it, but I think the second game, the follow-up, is where it just goes fucking bananas and is absolutely off the chain. Like, it is one of the wildest single-player campaigns I've ever played, and I still strongly recommend you play it, Bally. It is so fucking good. So yeah. But I also think it's good to play the first one to get context, so yeah.
Did you buy a PS4 in 2015?
Yes, because Uncharted 4 came out, and I think that's when I got one.
Because Infamous Second Son came out in 2014.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the weakest Infamous, if I'm honest. Like, I think it's, from a visual and, like, mechanical standpoint, very strong, but I would say, like...
Was it, like, at launch and a bit shorter?
Yeah, it was a launch game, and so I think it was not quite as... I think it was, like, the launch window, so it came out a few months afterwards, maybe. But, yeah, it wasn't quite up to... Like, it had more diverse power set, and so you had different abilities and stuff, but I don't think narratively or like world wise it was as fun as the first 2 games. I think Infamous 2 is still probably the benchmark for that series in terms of everything, but yeah, I still enjoyed it a lot, and I thought it was very good. I also played Shadow of Mordor, which I thought was like solid, but I wouldn't put it in a list, I don't think. But that game is very well made, and I respect it a lot. Apparently the Game of Thrones Telltale series also came out this year, which I think was probably the worst Telltale series, just like incredibly boring and bad, and did not like that quite a bit. And yeah, and Strider as well. Strider came out in 2014, which is a really good Metroidvania that I might have put on a list as well, I think, because it's very kind of action heavy and fast, and has all the pacing stuff that I like from those types of games. So yeah.
Apparently the original Bravely Default came out in 2014.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's one I still want to go back to. I need to pick up a physical copy or just get it before the eShop gets nuked completely. The reason I didn't pick it up is because it was like still full price, and I was like, is there going to be any way for me to get this game cheaper? And I'm not sure there is. But of all the Bravely Default games, that sounds like the one that people kind of recommend the most is the first one still. Even if it has some issues with like there's a lot of like looping stuff that goes on that people are annoyed about. But yeah.
Rayman Legends came to PS4 and Xbox One. I think it was Wii U before that.
Yeah, it was Wii U. It was Wii U the year before, so I wouldn't count that. Valiant Hearts is a really good one, especially because they just announced they're doing another Valiant Hearts with Netflix.
Right.
It's going to be on Netflix, I think. And that was it's kind of like the end of Ubisoft doing interesting art projects, and then after that they kind of gave up, which is a shame because I think Valiant Hearts is a fantastic game, and also you can play that on Switch as well. So, I think it's definitely something that our audience would be interested in. But yeah, I think 2014 was a pretty weak year. Dragon Age Inquisition was the thing that was winning all the awards, basically.
I remember going around to yours. I think it was that year, and I think you played it when it came out. Walking Dead Season 2.
Yeah. Season 1 is The Walking Dead that really meant a lot to me. I think Season 2 is totally fine and passable, but not great, basically.
Okay. I enjoyed Season 1 a lot, actually, yeah.
Yeah, Season 1's fantastic. But yeah, Season 2, not quite nailing it for me. But yeah, I think that's a good kind of rundown of that year, and I think, it was pretty... generally the games industry was like, this is a terrible year for games, and then as Nintendo people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's Smash Brothers and Mario Kart and Donkey Kong and like Shovel Knight, like
we've been waiting years for these games.
Yeah, like it was a really strong year for Wii U and 3DS, and
you gotta remember Tropical Freeze was a huge disappointment when it was revealed at E3 in 2012.
Dude, GameSpot gave Tropical Freeze a 6 out of 10 when they reviewed it. Like, can you fucking believe that shit? Yeah, I don't know, man. It's actually pretty wild to me that happened, because like if you play that game, if you like even have any brief amount of time with hands on sticks, like you can instantly tell that this is a very, very good game.
Totally.
And I do think that played into it, right? I do think the idea that Retro is like, oh, they're not doing Metro, they're doing another Donkey Kong game, I guess. And yeah, it really does a disservice to what a tremendous game that is. But yeah, GameSpot gave it 6 out of 10.
Really random, did you ever watch or play The Last of Us DLC?
I did, yeah. I watched. It was in 2013 that I watched. This was when I was getting a bit more into non-Nintendo games,
non-Nintendo stuff.
Yeah, but I didn't play them, so I watched playthroughs of both The Last of Us and BioShock Infinite. And yeah, those were games that I had context for Giant Bomb's Game of the Year, which was nice, but I didn't have to play them myself because they were too scary for me to play. So yeah, both BioShock Infinite and Last of Us were both two big story games that I watched Let's Plays of, and then I watched the next year, when Left Behind came out, I watched the playthrough of that.
I played Left Behind just before Last of Us Part 2 came out, and it was very, very good.
Yeah, it's a really good DLC.
That's obviously a DLC. And finally, Forza Horizon 2. I don't know how I'm ever going to access that game, but I would have loved to have played that in 2014, but there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And I've played the whole of the Master Chief Collection since, so I guess you can mention that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a collection.
I don't think any Halo game came out in 2014, unless it was Halo 4. No. I don't know when Halo 4 came out, so
I can't remember.
No idea. But yeah, that's a good kind of rundown of our games of the year and kind of looking back on them. 2014. I think we'll make this a bit of a regular segment, Bally, where we go back for...
Yeah, let us know what you think of it, because we've got a lot of Game of the Year lists we want to go through, because it's a good time.
Yeah, and things evolved, obviously, throughout the years, and I'm sure we'll get more in-depth and stuff as we go along.
But as a year generally, I'm impressed. Our tastes on those games haven't changed a ton, perhaps. I think some other games on other lists we're going to be like, what were we thinking?
Sure.
So it's interesting. 2014, the longest to go, we're actually similar tastes now.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm so glad you've now played Tropical Freeze.
Oh yeah, totally. And it deserves to be high on any 2014 list, very, very, very good, and some good stuff. And now we just need to wait for you to play Bayonetta 2, Bally. So we'll see how that goes.
And we'll have to check in again on the check-in.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I don't have high hopes, but we'll see. We'll see how you feel. Anyway, I think that is going to close us out for today's podcast. So thank you, everybody, for listening and for joining us on this episode. We talked about a lot of stuff, and you can go and find us all over the internet in lots of different places. But if you would like to support us directly and give us some money, because you're nice people, then you can go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. Bally, we'd like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, and Wicked Gamer UK Alan. Thank you all for your $10 tier support, but thank you to all of our other patrons. We hugely appreciate the support you give the show.
Absolutely.
And to shout out our Patreon shows, we have 2 extra Patreon shows for patrons. We have for $1 tier, you can listen to our our show, This Nintendo Life. That's a monthly show where we talk about everything Nintendo happening. We just did our Immortality spoiler cast, but we talked about a bunch of other stuff as well.
Yep.
And then obviously for $2, so on the Tuesday after every show, every day of the regular show, so it comes out on a Monday. Bonus Bits comes out on Tuesday. We talk about all sorts of things, TV. I think we're going to talk about these GTA leaks this time, so check that out as well.
Absolutely. The Queen dying, fun things, politics, get into it. So yeah, you can check all that stuff out. You can also find us on the internet, on Twitter. I am at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally? I
am on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
And you can also find the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast, where we'll tweet out things about the show and other stuff going on. So keep an eye on that if you want to know what is happening. You can also find us in various podcatching apps. You can go to Spotify and find us there. You can find us on Stitcher. You can go to your device of choice and search for us, This Nintendo Life. Subscribe to us, and we should be there for your perusal. And of course, if you would like to review us, you can head over to Spotify on your phone and give us a star rating, and that would be very much appreciated. So go ahead and do that. And also, if you want to do an iTunes review, I guess you can still do that. But I don't know how many people are still doing those these days as people shift away from Apple, I guess, in favor of other podcasting apps. I'm sure there's still a lot of people using the regular Apple podcasting app. So if you are able to give us a review over on Apple Podcasts, that would be highly appreciated as well. It's been probably a long time, I think, since anyone's done that. But if you want to do that, then you certainly can go ahead and do it, and we would highly appreciate it. So you can do that as well. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I actually, Bally, you sent me, you're like, oh, I got my email for my play date. I was like, sweet. I also have one. Maybe we'll get it this month. And then also I got an email saying my Steam Deck is coming. So if I get a play date and a Steam Deck on the same day, it will be that will be very funny, because like one of those I ordered like a year and a half ago, and was like one of the first people to order it, and the Steam Deck I ordered maybe like 3 weeks ago, and it's already coming. So I think Valve is more on top of their shit, I would say, than Panic are at this point in time, which makes sense.
We got so screwed on that play date thing by being in the UK. My God,
it's so fucking screwed. Oh my God! But what are you gonna do? We'll get it eventually, and we'll be cranking. So looking forward to cranking it with the play date. I'm sure we'll talk about that when that happens, but until then, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back very soon. Bye bye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were Calamari Inkantation 3 Mix from Splatoon 3, copyright Nintendo 2022, and Foliana Heights from Tinykin, copyright Splash Team 2022.